So you want to beat Battle for Bikini Bottom as quickly as possible, using advanced techniques you've probably seen in other people's speedruns, or maybe you're here to try out some of this stuff for fun. Either way, you've come to the right place. Whether you've never seen a speedrun before, or maybe you're a returning speedrunner after a long hiatus, you'll hopefully be nailing all the strategies used to beat this game in under an hour by the end of this tutorial. In fact, to assure the explanations of these tricks are made as clear as possible, I collaborated with several speedrunners, brand new and experienced alike, to learn the run using this video and provide feedback on what to improve. Those who chose not to remain anonymous will have their names listed in the credits section. Now, before we get into the basics, I must ask that if you find this video helpful or if you're a longtime fan of this game, that you leave a like on this video because it really helps make this content more visible to more people. All I want is for as many people to see and learn the game with this resource as possible. So without further ado, let's get into the basics of running and then we'll start going over the route. All timestamps are listed in the description of this video. You can use them to help yourself navigate through the tutorial more efficiently. Battle for Bikini Bottom is playable on 3 versions and 6 platforms. The game was originally released for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube, and is playable through backward compatibility on the Wii, Xbox 360, and backward compatible PS3. All you have to do is put the original disc into the next generation console. Every strategy covered in this video is doable on all versions and Dolphin emulator as well. However, if you're aiming to get a sub 1 hour time, that goal is only achievable on the Xbox and Xbox 360 versions due to the faster loading times on these platforms. But sub 1 hour shouldn't be your immediate goal anyway, that's more of a long-term thing. So learn the game and do some runs with whatever version you have access to, and then pick up an Xbox or Xbox 360 once you get more into it. I and a lot of my friends personally started with the GameCube version and switched later. In fact, GameCube, Wii, and Dolphin emulator are the most popular starting platforms, so don't worry about which version you start with. There's always time to upgrade later. Now at this point you might be wondering how to buy a copy of this game. I'll leave some links in the description of this video for where you can purchase the game. But generally speaking, if you go on eBay and search for the game name and whatever version you're looking for, such as Battle for Bikini Bottom Xbox or Battle for Bikini Bottom PS2, you'll find some pretty affordable results, usually somewhere between 15 and 30 United States dollars. And if you're taking the Dolphin route, go to this link for a setup guide on how to use the emulator. This link will also be in the description of this video. Okay, so before we even start a run, I have to teach you guys how to move. This game being a 3D platformer and all. And I don't mean basic controls like jumping and spinning and bashing. I mean more subtle things that you didn't notice when you were a kid. So yeah, the first thing you'll notice when you boot up this game is that the movement controls feel very sensitive. And a big reason for this is because of the pivot turning function. Notice how if you turn SpongeBob in the complete opposite direction, he'll sort of pivot instead of walking in a straight line. Keep this in mind for later because there are a lot of tricks that involve walking and turning in a straight line, in which you will need to jump before turning. By jumping before turning, you can negate the effects of the pivot. This is an important strategy when facing the camera and trying to turn around in the opposite direction, such as after collecting a spatula, or facing the opposite direction and needing to face toward the camera, such as with the Goo Lagoon sponge glide. Jumping in this game is also nuanced. You may be familiar with this from other games, but depending on how long you hold down the A button, SpongeBob will jump shorter or higher, and this applies to both his single and double jumps. By far the most important concept for you to grasp right now is jump spacing, however. When walking off a ledge, SpongeBob has 15 frames or 1/4 of a second to jump before falling. You can also extend this distance by using the spin attack in midair, which is also referred to as spin stalling. Maximizing your jumps, jump spacing off a ledge, and spin stalling are 3 fundamental concepts you must understand and practice to advance in this game. One control you may not be aware of is switching camera profiles. Zooming the camera is done differently on each console, but for example, on the Xbox version you press down the right analog stick, and on the GameCube version you press the Z button. Now if you've seen a speedrun of this game before, you might be wondering, how do the runners move through the menu so quickly? And the answer is that rather than holding down the control stick, or pressing down on the same control stick repeatedly, you can actually alternate moving both the left and right control sticks up or down. Because the pause menu takes input from both the left and right analog sticks, this allows you to achieve that fast menuing. If you're playing on the PS2 or GameCube version, you will need a memory card to do one of the tricks in this tutorial. And if you're playing on Dolphin, you're going to have to emulate taking the memory card in and out. So for Dolphin users, I'll show you how to do this now. If you go to your Dolphin menu and go to Configuration up here, and then switch to the GameCube tab as shown here, you'll get these options for memory cards where you can just select and choose what you want. So for you right now, it might just be set to nothing. So if we set it to nothing and we go back to the game, it'll say no memory card. So if we go back and then set slot A to a memory card now we go back to the game, it should read the memory card. We will start the run with the memory card enabled, but after collecting the Tree Dome spatula, we're going to take it out. So you have to go back here during the run and switch it back to nothing. And as you can see, the game's no longer reading it. And this should go without saying, but don't remove the memory card while you're saving. Only do it before the save game logo appears and after it disappears. This rule applies to actual consoles as well. Now just for a general game plan so you know what's ahead. The objective of the game is to collect 75 golden spatulas to enter the Chum Bucket Lab and defeat the Robot SpongeBob boss. You obtain 2 spatulas from defeating this boss, so therefore you end with 77 spatulas. There are 2 power-ups along the way you'll need to do this. The Bubble Bowl and the Cruise Bubble. The Bubble Bowl is obtained by defeating Robot Sandy. The Cruise Bubble is obtained by defeating Robot Patrick. With the Bubble Bowl power-up, we can abuse the skee ball machine in the Goo Lagoon Pier to generate shiny objects for purchasing toll gates and golden spatulas. So our first objective in part 1 will be to unlock the entire hub world and collect enough golden spatulas to obtain the Bubble Bowl power-up. In part 2, we will use the skee ball machine trick and collect other golden spatulas to make a total of 40. Therefore having enough to enter the Robot Patrick boss fight and obtain the Cruise Bubble from defeating him. Now that we've achieved both powers, we can enter part 3, during which we'll use the cruise boosting exploit to sweep the rest of the game. Throughout the run, we will collect a total of 20 socks to trade to Patrick. For these 20 socks, we will obtain 2 golden spatulas for trading them in. So make sure you're paying attention to the sock locations as we're going through the run. Now that you understand the game's basic mechanics and a general idea of how the route will work, it's time to actually start going through the route. This will effectively be the end of the setting up section. For the next 3 sections, I recommend you pace yourself. Perhaps only go through 1 part per day, 1 part for every few days, or so forth. The actual gameplay is something you don't want to rush learning. And if you're having trouble remembering the order of things, don't worry. The split file I'll be creating for you to use will have the number of golden spatulas and socks that you need for each level. Splits and other speedrunning tools will be explained at the end of this video in part 4. Now let's get started with part 1. Throughout the next 3 parts of this tutorial, I'm going to be speaking very quickly, so please pause the video and rewind and rewatch if you need to at any point. This tutorial is designed for you to do that, so please watch at your own pace. If you're not on the Xbox version, you want to insert your memory card at this point, because we do use the autosave feature for the first part of the run. It's necessary for performing one of these tricks. So you're going to want to press start, go to new game, select yes when it asks if you want to save your progress, select the file you want to overwrite, and when you select yes on this, the timer starts, so say yes and start the timer at the same time. You'll notice that during areas where not a lot of explanation is required, I'm going to speed up the gameplay just to make things go by faster. So here we just collect 50 shiny objects to open the closet, collect the spatula, and we're going to leave the pineapple now. Now we're coming up to the most important glitch in the entire game. The first thing you do when you walk out of the pineapple is go to the taxi pad and lay next to it. When the hand grabs you, select yes to confirm the taxi prompt. So when you respawn, turn right to Mr. Krabs, and we're going to start scaling Squidward's house. This will be your first basic platforming test. So you recall that in part 0, I mentioned that holding down the A button for different durations of time will extend or shorten your jumps. So make sure that you're maximizing your jumps when you jump to the nose and then to the ear. And if you get the second jump right, you will grab the ledge on the ear, and you'll be able to climb on top of Squidward's house to get the golden underwear and jump over to SpongeBob's pineapple. And now we'll do the second part to disabling the hand. Walk back to the taxi pad and lay in the same spot you did before, and the hand should grab you and drag you into the loading zone over the taxi pad. And if you did this successfully, you should have the hand disabled. Now keep in mind that just because the hand is disabled, that doesn't mean that you can just go out of bounds on the sand and not get grabbed. The kill sand still has the same properties at the moment, where if you stand on it for an extended period of time, you will get grabbed. However, what is disabled is the kill aura or kill zones that are hovering over the out of bounds areas such as Cowabungy. So in this part, we're going to grab the sock in the first part of Jellyfish Fields and jump to the spatula, which is located out of bounds in the Cowabungy area. You might find this jump a bit harder than the one that we just did earlier. If you recall part 0, I mentioned that you can walk off a ledge for 15 frames or 1/4 of a second before losing your ability to jump. So make sure you space out that jump as long as possible. Walk off the ledge for as long as you can and do a full jump, and then another full jump, and then spin to make it to the ledge. And remember that you're practicing, so don't be afraid to fall here and just experiment a little bit with how long you can wait. There will be tighter jumps later in the run, so you're going to want to get used to making these now. Now jump down from the sock platform to the spatula located inside the ditch. If you're having difficulty grabbing this spatula, I recommend turning the camera downward to get a better visual on it. So once you grab the spatula, you'll respawn and you'll notice that the save game logo is over the screen. At this point, you want to pause the game and warp back to the first spatula in Bikini Bottom on top of the pineapple. And if you did this successfully, you will notice that the save game glitch has been activated. So as I mentioned before, disabling the hand does not protect you from the kill sand out of bounds. However, the save glitch does. So because we had this active, we can walk out of bounds over around downtown, and we're going to walk around all the way to get past the first hub area and skip to the tree dome. So this is going to take a little bit of time for you to walk around, so I'm just going to speed it up just so you can see where to go. And keep in mind there are a lot of invisible barriers out here, so remember you can rewind and rewatch this video if you're having trouble remembering the exact path we took out of bounds. I also find that zooming in the camera here can help you see where you're going, just so the dialogue at the top of the screen doesn't obstruct your vision. What you want to do here is go to the right and destroy all the duplicated-trons. There are 3 of them, so you want to get them all. Walk over around to the area where you see the fountain and the thunder tiki, then turn around and do a full sweep back. And you should be able to get rid of the rest of the robots that were on your way to the duplicated-trons. Collect the golden spatula, and if you're on PS2, GameCube, or Dolphin, remove the memory card after the save game logo disappears. This will save you a lot of time throughout the run because those platforms take a while to save the game. If you're on the Xbox version, however, the game saves instantly, so disregard this. And if you're using Dolphin, remove the memory card with the method we talked about in part 0. And remember that even though we're not using the memory card for the run past this point, make sure you keep it around to put it back in and save your game if you find yourself wanting to take a break between learning sessions, because you don't want to have to redo everything to continue learning. And now it's time to set up the second hub world skip, which utilizes an exploit called SpongeBob storage. Landing out of a double jump causes the SpongeBob animation to delay itself. So by double jumping and landing on top of a SpongeBob, you'll notice that without giving any analog input, the SpongeBob will wait to come out until it's finished. So what we can do is double jump on top of the SpongeBob and not give any analog input so he just stays in his animation. Then double jump again and move forward while you're in midair. The reason why we need to move while we're in air and not on the ground is because walking will cancel the animation that's being used to store the SpongeBob. So double jump over the SpongeBob and land on it. Double jump again during the crouching animation and push forward. Make sure that you stop moving before you land on the ground, otherwise you'll transform into the SpongeBob. Keep repeating this motion until you get to the grass patch by the toll gate, and go around it to avoid getting the text box that's by the industrial park entrance. Now you're going to have to jump on top of the toll gate right on this edge so you don't get the text box, and then jump straight to the ledge up here, and hold into the corner that's between this gate and the wall. This part may be a little bit more difficult as it requires a little bit more control, but we're going to attempt to get on top of the police station from this state now. Flick your control stick to the left so SpongeBob rolls off the cliff a bit, and once he gets a little bit farther down, push back into the wall so he bounces off of it, and when you notice that he's gained a little bit of height, press the B button to cancel the SpongeBob, and press the A button to jump immediately after you cancel it. If you press these buttons quickly one after another, you'll do a single jump out of the SpongeBob and you'll be able to get another double jump on top of the police station. Now I said to use the B button to cancel and the A button to jump, but that'll differ based on which console you're using. But you will notice that when you're playing, there are 2 buttons that can be used to cancel the SpongeBob. So just make sure you're using separate buttons for canceling the SpongeBob and jumping. This makes things a bit easier as you can just slide your thumb from one button to the other. If you're having trouble bouncing off the wall, try pulling back on the control stick immediately after bouncing off. Pushing forward into the wall and pulling back immediately after you hit it can give you a much stronger and higher bounce. Once you're on top of the police station, I recommend getting the golden underwear inside the pipe. This isn't required, but it'll make things a lot easier if you're new to the game. It does lose time to collect it though, so if you want to avoid it, then just go ahead. Now to skip to the second hub area, walk up to the corner of the police station like so. And now you'll have to space 2 extended jumps and a spin to get over the ledge, just like this. Beware of the invisible wall that extends over the cliff. If it's blocking you when you're jumping over the wall, try just going more to the left on your way over. Once you're over, go inside the chum bucket and make your way up to the pipe to bash off of it and grab the spatula. Now sometimes this bash won't work on the Xbox 360 version, so if you're on that version and you can't do it, use the wall jump mechanic instead. Once you grab the spatula, just walk out of the chum bucket and talk to Mr. Krabs to get the Krusty Krab warp. We're not going to go to the Krusty Krab yet, but we're going to save it for later. We are now ready to enter SpongeBob's dream. Keep in mind entering this that there is about to be a great difficulty spike in learning these tricks. Super Bounce Skip may take you some time to learn, and Oil Skip most definitely will take you longer to learn the other tricks. So remember to stay patient and keep referring back to the video when you struggle. Learning these tricks now will benefit you greatly in the long run. For 2 of these skips, you'll have to climb the blocks leading up to the first platform. These blocks turn on a cycle that starts when you load into the level. So to accurately simulate what it'd be like in a run, make sure you pause the game and reload the first spatula to start the level with the standard block cycle. You can skip to the 3rd block by jumping straight across if you get the right push off for the first block, or you can damage boost off the 2nd block. For the next spike block, you can land on this corner here to damage boost off and go to the next area. But keep in mind, you have to land on this exact area, otherwise the spikes will knock you into inconsistent directions. If you don't want to use the damage boost here, just wait for the block to turn so you can jump on the side without the spikes. But keep in mind that if you do this, you will throw off the cycle for the next skip, which is Super Bounce Skip. Start by spinning on the edge of this slide to accelerate faster. The longer you stay on the slide, the more speed you'll pick up. Now when you reach the edge of the slide here, perform 2 fold jumps. Because remember, you want to extend your distance as far as possible with this jump, otherwise you're not going to make it. If you extend your jumps far enough, you should land on the edge of this block. Now there's a relatively small window for jumping off the edge of this block. If you watch closely here, the frames during which SpongeBob's tongue is gone and he's taking his first steps forward are the ones on which you can input a jump. However, a lot of these later frames are useless because if you jump so late that you're pretty much off the block, you're not going to be able to get on top of it anyway regardless of whether you get your jump. Since the jump timing for this is especially tight, you're not going to be able to react to landing on the block in time to be able to jump. So what you should do instead is anticipate landing on it and press the A button when you know you're going to be landing on the block, instead of just reacting to it. This is what the jump looks like slowed down frame by frame. Make sure that through the entire duration you're jumping off the slide and pushing into the block, that you're always keeping the analog stick pushed forward. Only stop pushing the analog stick forward after you jump off the side of the block. This will allow you to get stuck to the side of the block and jump, and then prepare yourself for getting on top of the block. Now, getting on top of this block is a whole different story, and because my original recording didn't have the block visible, I decided to re-record it, just so you can see what's going on. The most important aspect of this trick to understand is that the spikes have hitboxes all around them. They're not just on top. So if you push forward into these spikes while you're making your way up to the block, you will get knocked away from the block. Instead, make sure that your jump is already higher than the spikes before pushing into them. That way you land on top of the spikes and get damage boosted upward, rather than being damage boosted away from them. And now for the final part of this trick, getting on top of the trampoline. You have 2 options to use based on which block cycle you're on. Go for the trampoline in front of you if it's not already under the next block. If this trampoline's already out of reach, turn around and jump on the trampoline that should be approaching you. Keep in mind that if you're waiting for the next trampoline to come, you can stand on the spikes for a short while after being damaged. Just don't stand on them for too long or your health will deplete. And once you land on the trampoline, you can land on top of Squidward's house and grab the next spatula. Now that you're finished learning Super Bounce Skip, here's a full segment. When you collect the Super Bounce spatula, make sure you land next to it and walk into it, as opposed to just landing on top of it. Much like how the double jump animation delays the SpongeBob transformation, it delays spatula celebrations as well. So generally speaking, if you ever find yourself having to double jump before collecting a spatula, with very few exceptions, make sure you land next to it and walk into it. Not doing this is a very common mistake from beginners, so just make sure you're aware of it. After the spatula is collected, drop to the ground and enter Squidward's dream. Pause the game and select the first level in SpongeBob's dream, across the dreamscape. Oil skip starts with the same block jumping segment that Super Bounce does. But when you reach the second and final block, wait for the spikes to turn and stand on the non-spiked edge. At this point, you want to wait for the oil robot's oil orb to pass the vegetation that's circled on the screen right now. Once he moves away, make your way up to the platform. Once you make it up to the platform, stand by the rocks and face the circled burger that's out in the distance. If you're not on the Xbox version, the circled burger will not be within draw distance, so you'll have to find a different visual marker. You can try to use this extruding section of the island, but ultimately I just say face forward and try to find something that works for you. Once SpongeBob is facing forward toward the burger, you want to position him right in front of this small rock over here. To make this easier, use the spin attack before you start moving. This will prevent SpongeBob from turning as long as the spin animation's out. So once you complete the first part of the setup, you should have this right here. The burger, SpongeBob, and the rock are all perfectly in line, and SpongeBob is standing just in front of the rock. Now that we're set up, we're going to use the oil attack to do a damage boost across the dreamscape. The sound cue you're waiting for is the slick firing the oil at you. Once you hear this sound, walk forward to this small rock shown here, and put yourself just in line with it like this. Make sure that your original line from the burger to SpongeBob to the first rock is still perfectly straight. If you have what's shown here, the setup should work. Now right before the oil attack hits you, jump up with a full jump, and then slam immediately after the bursting sound for the oil shot ends. Now this should give you the damage boost, and you should slide against the ledge if you set it up correctly. What you must understand for this trick is that holding down the A button to get a full jump, and then slamming at the absolute peak of your jump height is required for this trick to work. Because slamming with a short jump won't damage boost you far enough to get the slide off the ledge. During the sliding animation, you have 15 frames or 1/4 of a second to bash. Bashing during this 15 frame window will allow you to retain your momentum and launch across the dreamscape. You can either learn the timing for this by pressing the bash button during those frames, or just mash instead, whichever one you're comfortable with. But once you're airborne, just wait for the bash to end and then use your double jump to make it to the island. Unlike Super Bounce Skip, which is mostly movement-based and fluid, Oil Skip is very much a trick that must be broken down to its basic components to stay consistent. So don't rush any of these steps or blend them together. And by blending, I mean don't jump and move at the same time, don't jump, move, and slam all at the same time, don't cut corners when setting up your positioning. Just make sure you're doing each individual part of this trick separately. I will admit this is probably the hardest skip that we'll cover in the entire tutorial, so you should feel very accomplished once you get it down. This was previously not a strat taught to beginners, but I realized recently that it's worth teaching due to how much it affects the rest of the route. The earlier you get used to it, the quicker you'll start getting faster times. Alright, so I promise the next trick is a lot easier than the previous two, but before we learn it, go to Patrick's dream and collect the spatula. Pause the game and warp to Super Bounce, which is the 7th spatula in the dream menu. You can enter Sandy's dream from here. Now for this trick, I'm actually going to refer you to my past self to teach it, because I like the way I explained it in the past. So don't mind the lower capture quality, mic quality, and the wrong aspect ratio. I'll be doing this several more times throughout the duration of the tutorial, but don't worry, all of these setups are still relevant today. I wouldn't be showing them to you if they weren't. When you load into Sandy's dream, swing to the slide and try to run along the left side of it. Once you reach this point of the slide, hook a sharp right into the direction of the acorn and perform 2 double jumps and begin gliding forward. You'll need to space your jumps well and know that holding down the jump button produces a full jump, rather than simply tapping to perform a short jump. So space 2 full double jumps and then begin gliding. Make sure you don't wait too long to start gliding either, or you'll miss the area on the acorn where you need to land. And if you start gliding too early, you can still recover. Just let yourself fall and kick toward the acorn. This should stall Sandy in the air long enough to land on the side. You can't use the kick twice though. Only the first kick will stall you, and the second will cause you to descend. Once you've landed, make your way to the left side of the acorn. Jump up to this area on the purple shaded area of the acorn, and from here you just want to mash the jump button to get up as high as possible. What you're aiming to do here is trigger an invisible checkpoint that will respawn you on top of the acorn when you die. Typically, you should look for Sandy's helmet to be completely stuck under the upper part, which means you probably got it. Now once you've done this, drop to the slide and make your way to the manure truck because you're going to death warp on it. When landing on the truck, make sure you glide over to it, because landing on it without gliding will cause the slide momentum to knock you off the truck. Sit on the truck until Sandy's health depletes and you die. If you did the trick properly, it should respawn on top of the acorn where you can collect the golden spatula. If you fail, you'll spawn on the starting platform where you enter the level. And remember, if you fall into the void at any point, you can just reload Sandy's dream and try again. One thing that I'd like to add here is that the reason why you have to reload the level if you fail is because the hand is currently disabled, or at least it should be at this point. If while going through this tutorial you turned off your console and turned it back on at some point, you have to redisable the hand before resuming learning. This trick specifically requires the hand disabled as well, so just make sure you're doing that whenever you power back up. Now that you've collected the spatula, let me be the first to congratulate you for getting out a dream. Pause the game, scroll down to Mr. Krabs, and warp to the first and only unlocked spatula. Now go over and enter Squidward's house and jump 10 times to complete his challenge. Now in this case, the jumps are registered by how high off the ground you go, so you don't have to land on the ground, jump, land on the ground, jump 10 times in a row. You can actually just jump and then double jump before you reach the ground 5 times, because you'll be bobbing up and down the threshold that counts as a jump. The double jump method is faster, but it may take some time to get a feel for, so if you're just trying to do it consistently, you can do the 10 jump method from the ground. But either way you choose, once you're finished, leave Squidward's house after you get the spatula, walk over to Patrick, collect the sock from him and get the warp, and then make your way over to the Goo Lagoon taxi pad. Now here you're going to want to jump behind the taxi pad to enter it. The reason for this, and for doing it on future taxi pads, is that entering the zone where you can accept the prompt while the cutscene is playing allows you to skip the cutscene. It may only save a second to a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds each time, but it adds up pretty quickly. Just remember though that if you fail this and re-enable the hand by accident, you have to re-disable it before entering Goo Lagoon, because you're going to need it disabled for the next major trick. Entering Goo Lagoon, you can skip bashing on this little plank and jump across the gap. Make your way over to Larry, get the warp from him, and walk over to the tower that's across this moat area. Now we will begin to set up the Early Towers glide, which is used to levitate across the Goo Lagoon beach and land on the crate island with the robot on top of it. To start off, walk against the tower and position SpongeBob right around here, where his belt buckle will be perfectly in line with these 2 dots that are on the sand. Depending on which version you have, the textures may be a little bit more subtle and blurred, so you may have to look a little bit harder to see it. It may also depend on the quality of your TV as well. And notice how there is a button on the far side of the tower that's just hanging off the top. You want to use the camera to adjust the right side of this button to sit in the middle of the gap between the top crate and the 2 crates supporting it. Here's a diagram to show you what I mean. Now, if you recall from part 0, I talked about jumping to turn yourself without pivoting. This is an important concept to understand here, because we're going to use it to set up this damage boost. From this position, with yourself in line with the dots and the button in the correct spot between the crates, do a full jump and turn around in that order. Hold down the A button to do a full jump, and immediately after you leave the ground, pull backward in a straight line. Do another full jump and a spin to extend your distance as far as possible without touching the ground. If you touch the ground, you will reset your position where you'll land from the goo, and therefore ruin the damage boost because you won't be sent back to the tower. Now from here, timing is absolutely key. It's hard to put into words exactly when to jump here, but you want to delay yourself a little bit before you jump back to the tower. And from the damage boost here, the only input you should be doing to get back to the tower is just the A button, or whatever the jump button is mapped to on your console. Just wait a little bit after you get damage and then hold down the A button. Don't push forward because it'll mess up your angle, just let yourself float. Now if you did this correctly, you should be on course to collide with the tower wall. Shortly after touching the wall, press the bubble bounce button, and if the timing on this is correct, you should get stuck on the wall and float off to the side. Here's an example with on-screen markers showing when to input each move. If you're trying to figure out what you messed up, slamming too early will make you slide to the left, but you'll eventually just fall straight down and hit the ground. Slamming too late will just cause you to fall down in a straight line, so try to get somewhere between these two. I think the best way to learn this trick is recording your own gameplay and comparing it to a full speed segment as shown here. It's a lot easier to see flaws in your gameplay when you're watching it from a third-person view. Once you get the glide, you'll either land on the island or drift too far past it to the left. If you drift past the island, it means that your angle was off a little bit, so make sure that when you're setting up the angle with the button on the crate, put the right side of the button in between the crate gap. If you're still drifting too far left, you can try putting the button more to the right like this. But yeah, generally speaking, if you're floating past the island, it means the camera angle is too far left. This trick can be pretty difficult for some new players, so don't be frustrated if it takes you a while to learn it. It's very feel-based, and a lot of the steps are hard to explain. Now for the next trick, Early Towers Bash. Don't get frustrated if you drown trying to attempt this and have to redo the sponge glide to get back there. Either way, if you're speedrunning this game, you're going to have to do the sponge glide many more times. So it's all just extra practice that'll help you in the long run. Failing and learning from your mistakes will only make you better at the game. Now before Early Towers Bash, you have to destroy the robot on top of the crates. Otherwise, Larry won't give you the Connect the Tower spatula later. To begin setting up this trick, drop to this side and turn the camera like so. Have SpongeBob facing the same direction as the starfish on the crates. And kind of put SpongeBob's face right up against the back of it like he's eating his ass. Once you see this, turn the camera until it gets obstructed by the crates, forcing it to zoom forward automatically like this. Now much like for Early Towers Glide, you want to jump before turning here. If you do it in the opposite order, you're not going to get the correct alignment. And the way you jump on this crate is even more important. If you stand on the crate for too long when you jump on it, SpongeBob's positioning before landing on the goo will update to the crate. So when you try to damage boost, the goo will just send you right back to the crate instead of in front of it. So jump, turn around, land on the crate, and at the exact moment, as soon as you can possibly jump, immediately jump and double jump while holding back on the control stick. Going too far back here will cause you to drown. And not going far enough won't give you a fast enough speed boost. So you want to be somewhere between to get the right amount of boost without drowning. And that will of course come with practice. Now if you did this all correctly, SpongeBob should be shot back to the area in front of the crates where you were standing before. When you're around here, input the bash button and press forward to get launched to the island. Don't mash the bash button for this because I found that mashing causes you to go a little bit slower. Just try timing it by pressing the bash button a single time. If you realize you're not going fast enough to make it to the island immediately after bashing, use the spin attack and pull back to the island to stop your momentum and try again. If you're committing to the damage boost and you realize you can barely make it, you can use a spin attack to make up that little extra distance to make it to the island. And of course, if you just barely miss it, you will drown and have to start over again with Early Towers Glide and then the bash again. But as I said before, don't get frustrated with this because you're just going to get more practice and you'll be better at both of these tricks by the time you start your first run. This third trick is a lot more lenient than the first two, but the timing is a little bit different. Have this pole parallel to the back of SpongeBob's body and walk forward to the edge of this red circle on the ground. Now from here, you want a full jump, then turn, then full jump again, which will give you a slight run off the cliff and land you in the goo, which will damage boost you back. Once you damage boost off of the goo, double jump as soon as possible and hold it without moving the analog stick at all. And you should get launched against the tube. Now, like I said, the timing for this is a little bit different than it was for the previous tricks. Wait until the instant that SpongeBob starts falling down the tube to slam. This will probably be more like Super Bounce Skip where you just have to get used to how long it'll take for him to start falling, because if you wait to react to it, he'll probably fall too far down. If you slam too early, you'll either just fall straight down or get stuck. If you slam too late, you'll just slide back a little bit and fall anyway. So experiment with the timing for yourself, but just remember that the slam timing here is a little bit more delayed than it was for the first glide that we learned earlier. And if you had the right camera angle and the right slam timing, you should float past the dock area and into the loading zone for Goo Lagoon Pier. Now that you've finished learning the tricks on the Goo Lagoon beach, here's a full segment to reference with full speed and audio. When you enter Goo Lagoon Pier, make your way up to the teleport box up here and jump into it. Now head up to the bus stop and switch to Patrick. It's rare that this won't happen, but make sure on the way to the pier you get the text box from Mr. Krabs. If you don't do this, you won't be able to warp back here later into the run. To set up the ticket booth skip, jump on top of this wooden tiki and try to hit both of the wooden tikis supporting the thunder tiki at the same time. If you're having trouble with the double hit, you can just drop to the floor and hit both tikis individually and then pick up the thunder tiki as it falls to the ground. Now maneuver around these platforms in this path and walk off the second platform. As you're walking off the second platform, aim the tiki in the direction of the ticket booth tent and throw it as you're falling. If you do this successfully, the tiki will blow up the ticket booth while you're drowning, so you'll respawn and therefore skip the cutscene. Then turn around, talk to Mr. Krabs again, and walk over to the sea caves, where we'll continue going in the reverse direction for Goo Lagoon. This part's pretty self-explanatory. Just grab the spatula here on the dock, turn around and jump into the box, and exit the sea caves over here. You'll load back into Goo Lagoon Beach here, so you can grab the spatula, and once you're finished with that, pause the game and warp to the second spatula in the menu for Goo Lagoon. Connect the towers. Since you already destroyed the robot during the gliding and boosting segment, Larry will give you the spatula for completing the challenge. So collect the spatula and we're done here for now. Congratulations, you've successfully finished learning Goo Lagoon 1. Now pause the game, scroll up to Jellyfish Fields, and select the second spatula in the menu. Cowabungie. You might find this strange that we're doing Jellyfish this late into part 1, but this is simply because we need to warp out of the Cowabungie spatula to activate the save glitch in the beginning of the run, and there's really no room to warp up to Jellyfish Fields between Dream and Goo Lagoon. So that's why we're doing Jellyfish now, and this will be the final level we do before going to Poseidome to power up and get the Bubble Bowl. Before attempting to learn Hammer Skip, make sure that you activate this checkpoint up here, because if you die attempting, you'd rather respawn here than where you loaded in. The premise of Hammer Skip is pretty simple, but the manipulation tactics can get a little bit more tricky. What you want to do is manipulate this robot to move up this rock, and once he's standing around in this position, jump on top of his head, bash up to touch the edge of the cliff, and drown yourself. If you touch the right part of the cliff when you bash, you'll respawn on top of it. The most common mistake here is not understanding when the hammerbot can follow you. Wait for him to start darting toward you after attacking and then move to where you want him to go. Of course you have to remember that he's going to try attacking you, so he's not going to follow your exact movements but rather just lag a little bit behind you. That's why you need to jump farther up this rock than where you want him to stand. So that way he stops earlier and spaces his hammer attack to go where you were standing. Have a look at this diagram to understand what I mean. If you move to where you want him to go, he'll space his hammer out to hit you and therefore be lower down on the rock. But if you go higher on the rock than where you want him to go, he'll have to go higher up as well. If he goes a little bit too high, you can just drop down to the bottom of the rock and lure him back down. Make sure you don't jump on top of the robot's head while it's attacking, otherwise you might get knocked away. If the robot happens to die while setting this up, just drown yourself in the pond and when you respawn, he'll be respawned as well. You may have to try several different robot positions before getting it. The checkpoint trigger is invisible, so it may take some time to memorize where it is. Just know that after you touch the trigger, you can take as long as you want to drown, and it'll still work. If you're struggling with Hammer Skip, you can climb Jellyfish Rock instead. Understand though that this method is quite a bit slower, losing around 20 seconds to Hammer Skip. However, those 20 seconds won't make that big of a difference as a beginner, and there's always time to learn Hammer Skip and implement it later if you want to. So choose between these two strats for now based on which one you're more comfortable with, not necessarily which one saves more time. Once you respawn on top of the platform, make your way over to the Duplicatotron that's by this gate. Face yourself a little bit into the wall, jump, push forward, and spin all at the same time. And if you do this properly, you should destroy the Duplicatotron while opening the gate, revealing a golden spatula behind it. Now that we've finished skipping Jellyfish Rock, it's time to go into Dilemma Skip, for which again I have prepared a video for you guys to learn from. Take a look. When you first enter this level, you're going to want to collect the 2 socks before the fight. To get the first, jump onto the sledge while sliding and continue to find it later into the passage. For the second, space 2 full jumps to get on the edge of this tall platform. To maximize your jumps, hold down the jump button for both jumps rather than just tapping it. This will allow you to collect the second sock. Before starting the actual trick, remember to open this box as you'll need to travel in it later. Now jump off of the sledge over the goo in this spot, and you'll activate the cutscene trigger for Patrick's Dilemma. This is done so you drown during the cutscene, which skips the whole thing. When you respawn, walk around the left side of the checkpoint and make your way up to the top platform. Now before we cover the boost, I want to draw attention to how far SpongeBob can walk off this ledge while maintaining the ability to perform grounded moves. As shown here, even walking off the ledge this far allows SpongeBob to bash. You won't need to walk this far off for the trick, but it's good to keep in mind how much leeway there is when performing it. A lot of players fear walking off the ledge and drowning without realizing how much leniency there is for the bash timing, so don't be afraid to walk off the ledge slightly to set up the bash. So let's start talking about the boost. When you reach the top platform, start walking along the backside of the Duplicatotron robot and hit it with a bubble spin around this point when you walk by. Now once you hit this, you set the trick into motion, so keep in mind that you must continue without hesitation after you do this. Walk to make SpongeBob's back perpendicular to the back of the Duplicatotron. If you take a look at this diagram, you'll understand what I mean. Imagine the backside of the robot trying to cut SpongeBob in half. Now this is the part where walking off the ledge comes into play. Walk off the ledge with your back perpendicular to the back of this robot to about this point, just slightly off. Then use the bubble bash off the ledge. When you notice you reach the peak of your height, input a bubble bounce. If you time this correctly in one motion, you should be hit by a blast at the highest possible point. Now as soon as you regain the ability to jump, hold down the A button to perform a double jump and push toward the ledge. If you time this well, you should grab the edge, where you can then make your way to the Patrick text box trigger to finish skipping the fight. You may accidentally input a jump on the first frame of activity after taking damage. This frame perfect jump will give you the first and second jump to get over the ledge. However, I don't recommend attempting to go for the single frame in runs. If you're too early, a jump won't come out and you'll just drown. You still want to do it as early as possible, but if you do it too early, you'll just fall into the goo without jumping. One of the most common mistakes I notice from new players attempting Dilemma Skip is using the spin attack during the period when SpongeBob can grab the ledge, because doing this will cause him to spin past the ledge and not grab it. If the spin method isn't really working out for you, you can try doing it without a spin. Just get the boost and push forward until you grab the ledge. And if you're still not making the jump, try walking more to the right and farther off the ledge during the damage boost setup. Just remember, don't be afraid to walk too far off the ledge. So yeah, Dilemma Skip is going to be a much greater test of how good you are at jump spacing. It seems like the appropriate skip to end part 1 because it kind of culminates everything you know about how far to walk off a ledge, when to jump, how long to hold your jumps for, moving in a straight line for jumping a large gap, and other fundamental skills in this game. But once you've collected the spatula as Patrick, pause the game and scroll down to Patrick, and select the first and only spatula unlocked. We are now ready to enter the first major boss fight in the game, Robo Sandy. As I mentioned in part 0, defeating this boss will give you the Bubble Bowl power, which we will then use to generate money from the skee ball machine and eventually use the cruise boosts. Just make sure that you have 15 golden spatulas and 4 socks before entering. If you don't have the right number of spatulas, the toll gate just won't let you through. But if you missed any socks, just go back in the video to check and see where you missed them. And without further ado, let's begin what is widely regarded as, yeah.
Wait till you see the. No, 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 no. Look at the top of his head. No, look at this one.
Yeah, so this is the part of the game that we can't skip. But still, there are some strategies and manipulations you'll have to learn for this fight. During phase 1, after Sandy does the people's elbow, approach her in center stage to make her jump early. And while she's airborne, you can time a jump and then a slam. Note that she does not become vulnerable the instant she hits the ground, so you'll have to learn and practice the timing for this. She becomes vulnerable slightly after touching the ground, as shown here.
Looks like the robot's left itself vulnerable.
Now you can do this 2 more times to finish off the rest of the phase. but make sure you keep her following you around the center of the stage, so that way you can make her jump early. Now during the third hit, pay attention to Neptune's positioning outside of the ring, and notice there's some translucent underwear floating near him. Walk over to this side of the ring after the third hit, and stand between the underwear and the logo in the center of the stage to set up Patrick for phase 2. Now this starts the clothesline move manipulation, which will be used for the next 6 hits of the fight. When Patrick loads in, walk to the underwear and then walk to the far back corner of the stage as shown here. When Sandy does the people's elbow, jump over the dust and back to the underwear. Now as she starts moving again, you want to walk from the underwear back to the corner you were just in. And if she follows you just the right way, this will happen.
Sling! The old clothesline move!
So this effectively cuts off all the time that it takes for Sandy to run against the wall and start the clothesline move, because you're manipulating her to already be against the wall when she starts doing it. And also, when you're against the wall like this, you don't have to dodge her attack. This is true for both phases 2 and 3, so you can just stand against the wall and she won't be able to damage you. After Sandy's out of range, walk back up to center stage and stand right outside of the logo around here, which is right outside the banner etched into the ground. Wait here for Sandy to jump, and once she does, walk to the center of the stage and slam once she becomes vulnerable. If you set this up correctly, her head should pop off in the direction of the scoreboard, so you can just walk toward it, pick up the head, and throw it into the scoreboard.
Losing its head! What a shocking takedown by Patrick!
While Sandy's being shocked, you can walk back to the center of the stage and stand on the corner of this green rectangle. Once she starts moving again, circle around her and make your way back to the corner of the stage, like this. And then after she does the people's elbow, go back to the underwear and make her follow you back to the corner like you did in the first part. And with this, she should do the clothesline move against the wall again. So you can go back to the center of the stage and set up the slam. Do this twice and end the phase waiting in the same spot you did before, on the edge of that green rectangle in the center of the stage. Now, as SpongeBob in Phase 3, it's pretty similar to Phase 2, but there are some small changes. Once again, circle around Sandy and head to the corner of the stage. After the people's elbow, go back to the underwear and have her follow you from the underwear back to the corner, and she should do the clothesline move. Now, instead of standing next to the banner in center stage this time, stand on the right side of the column that's etched into the ground, like this. Wait for her to jump, and once she does, walk back to avoid the attack, do a slam similar to the one you had to do in Phase 1, and her head will pop off for you to bash. Again, note that her head does not become vulnerable the instant you knock it off. You will have to wait a moment to hit it. But once you do, walk back to the underwear so she follows you. Return to the corner of the stage when she stops moving, and wait for her to attack. Once she's done, go back to the underwear and lure her back from the underwear to the corner of the stage again, and she should just bounce off the wall again. Repeat this 2 more times to finish Phase 3. Now, if you're having trouble with any of these steps, don't worry too much. You're not going to lose that much time as a beginner if you're not doing these perfectly. But as you get more experience, this fight becomes very consistent. So don't worry too much about how quickly you pick it up now. So now I'll play back the important sections of this fight, just so you have a full speed visual on what to do. Have a look.
Looks like the robot's left itself vulnerable. Great barrier reef! The robot better change tactics and fast. Sling! The old clothesline move! The robot's losing its head! What a shocking takedown by Patrick! Sling! Wow! I've never seen such an electrifying match! The old clothesline move! for a guy literally filled with openings. Oh, what an uppercut!
Once you've landed that final hit on Robo Sandy, you have successfully finished part 1 of this tutorial. At this point, take some kind of a breather or a break. You deserve it after learning so many tricks. In my opinion, part 2 isn't as difficult to learn as part 1 because it's more movement based than trick based. So just know if you've made it this far, you're in really good shape. Now, if you're already ready to start part 2, that's great as well. Let's go right ahead into the next part of the game. Okay, so we're not going to actually orchestrate a bank heist in Battle for Bikini Bottom, but this is the next best thing. And just in case you did take that break, we left off after defeating Robo Sandy having collected 16 spatulas and 4 socks. But before we continue, I have to remind you that if you decided to take a break and turn off the console between learning sessions, you'll have to redisable the hand before learning this next segment. Because remember that hand disabling does not persist when you turn off the console. Once you're ready, pause the game and scroll down to Goo Lagoon, then select Clean Out the Bumper Boats in this menu. After loading in, jump into the box, and we're going to do a little bit of platforming here to get out to the bumper boats. Just a combat refresher here, you have to slam on the G-loves, and you can hit the hammers with your belly attack, or you can hit the hammers into the G-loves, or stun the hammers or the G-loves to throw them into each other. Just keep those options in mind when trying to clear the bumper boats as quickly as possible. Now for some more platforming, we're going to climb on top of the food stand and grab the sock up here. Jump on the slide, make your way over to the clam, and from here you can jump across to the next section of the pier where we can grab the tiki for SBA. There are a couple of ways of doing this, so I'll show both of them. This first method is a little bit harder than the other one, but it is faster, so if you can do that, go ahead. And here's the other one where you go a bit to the left and then jump. Now from here you can run off this platform and mash the pickup button to pick up the tiki. If you're having trouble with this, try running off more to the left of the platform rather than the center. Now once you grab the tiki, walk over to this area on the edge of the pier and stand by these 4 nails. Face Patrick in the direction of this first moving platform and throw the tiki at it, which should cause it to land around the center of the platform. Now when you jump on this platform to pick up the tiki again, it's either going to rock back or forward, depending on how far you throw it. There are several ways of doing this, so you may want to experiment for yourself, but I feel the safest way is tilting the platform back and then inching forward until the platform is in a neutral state, as shown here. And once it's centered like this, throw the tiki again and it should land on the platform in front of you. From here, getting the tiki onto the next platform is pretty easy, but make sure you throw it next to this sign. The reason why we're putting this first tiki all the way over here is because we're going to go back and get a second one, which we don't want to auto-target and stack on top of the first one. So we're putting the first one all the way to the right, and we're going to go get the second one now and put it to the left. Now once you brought the second tiki over, pick it up and walk up to the ramp on the skee ball machine. I will show 2 methods for the first throw into the machine. The first one is the easier method, but if you're struggling with getting it, you can give the second method a try, which saves around 8 seconds, but it is a little bit more precise. To set up the first method, walk all the way up to the edge of this ramp until you can't walk anymore, and position yourself right above this centered arrow, and push forward into the 3 holes that you see up here. When you feel that Patrick is perfectly centered and stops moving, throw the tiki and it should fall through the skee ball machine. Once you've done this, you can jump into the skee ball machine, turn around, and face the tiki. Line yourself up with these holes that are under the skee ball machine, so that way all 3 of them are perfectly aligned. When you feel that Patrick, the tiki, and the 3 holes are all perfectly aligned, press the pickup button and then immediately press the throw button after that. And the tiki should get stuck in the upper level of the skee ball machine, jitter around for a bit, and then just sink into place. This method is guaranteed to work if you do it the right way. But if you're struggling with it, the slightly faster alternative is standing outside the machine around here, again with yourself facing toward the 3 holes, right above you in a straight line like this. Then slowly walk forward until Patrick's feet are resting at around the bottom of this arrow. As you can see here, I can draw a line from the bottom part of this arrow to Patrick's feet and they're perfectly in line. So once you see this, just throw the tiki and it should go into place. This method is a little bit more precise. And if you walk too far up the ramp, you'll have to slowly walk back down and reposition yourself for the bottom of the ramp facing forward to try again. Now, if this tiki doesn't go into place, you will have to redo the throw setup from outside the machine. So here's a pretty easy way to get the tiki out of the machine in case you mess this up. Pick up the tiki, walk up to the bottom hole, all the way against the edge, and throw it. Now jump out of the second hole here, and go in front of the ramp, but outside of the machine. Mash the pickup button in front of where you threw the tiki, and he should pick it up through the skee ball machine. Now from here you can walk back and stand under the ramp, and then press the throw button and the tiki should pop out over the ramp. From here you can just jump on top of the ramp, pick up the tiki, walk off the ramp, and then you can walk back up to the ramp to set up your throw again. But if you got the first tiki throw on your first try, that's great. Now you can leave the skee ball machine, grab the second tiki, and walk up to the ramp again. Repeat the first throw that you did earlier for the first tiki, and keep in mind that it actually is a lot more lenient this time, because the second tiki will auto-target on top of the first tiki when you throw it. Just make sure you're pressed up against the ramp and walking into it when you throw. If you don't do this, the top tiki might not hold the bubble bowl into the skee ball machine, and if you have to walk all the way back here to redo the setup, you're gonna lose a lot of time in your speed run. So chuck the tiki and it should land on top of the first one. Now go to the bus stop that's off to the right and switch to SpongeBob. Come back to the skee ball machine, jump into this hole here and face forward, then do 2 tap jumps to barely position yourself within grabbing range on the ring. And if SpongeBob grabs the ring perfectly flat like this, it means that you have the setup. Now all you have to do is tap the ball button as soon as the animation finishes, and the ball should get stuck in the hole. So once the money starts rolling in, that means you have successfully completed SBA. Now keep in mind it is possible, but very unlikely if you set it up correctly, that the ball will pop out and you'll have to go back to the machine to put it back in. If this happens, just return to the machine, toss another bowling ball up the machine to make the original one despawn, and then you can go ahead and set the bowling shot up again. If you can't seem to get it to stick, it probably means that you didn't set up the tikis correctly, which unfortunately means you're going to have to take both of them out of the machine and start over again. But you'll find that with practice, this trick is very consistent, so after a while, you probably won't have to find yourself doing that too often. But anyway, now that SBA is working, we can start collecting the other objectives in the pier. Just remember that if this stops working at any point, you're probably going to have to go back and put the ball back in, just because we need this to stay active to get enough shiny objects for the rest of the game. So now head on over to the slippery platform and jump on top of the oil barrel. Charge a bowling shot, hit the Duplicatotron, and a sock should spawn. Grab that and head up to the edge of the pier where I'm going now. Wait for the rotating platform, jump onto it, and head over to this clam. Now to purchase this clam, you're going to have to walk over here to get SBA out of range. So when you stop seeing the flashing 30s, it means that there's no text box on the screen to interrupt your buying the clam. So you can turn around, walk back, and purchase the clam, which should activate a cutscene that puts you back into range for SBA. So while you're watching the cutscene, you're still gaining shiny objects. Jump on top of the trampoline and go straight to the bungee hook. Dive for the spatula, leave the bungee, and after the animation finishes, pause the game to see how many shiny objects you have. If this number is under 40,000, just unpause and wait for it to go up more. And you can pause again a little bit later to check and see if you have it. And once it says 40,000, you should be good to go. So now jump down to these tents, jump on the slide, and it'll bring you over to these floating tikis, for which you'll just plow through the tikis under them, and then space 2 full jumps to jump under the pier and get to this spatula on the platform. Now if you fail this jump, it's alright because the number of shiny objects that I recommended for this route allows you to drown and therefore despawn the tikis inside the skee ball machine and still be able to go back to the slide and jump again to get the spatula without having to reset up SBA to get the rest of the shiny objects. But in the future, if you realize that you're not really messing up this jump, or if your SBAs are pretty consistent in generation rate, you can lower the number of shiny objects that you wait for according to how many you need in your route. Just pay attention to how many shiny objects you generally have left over at the end of your runs, and then you can just subtract that number from the number that you're waiting for at the pier. But yeah, once you've gotten this spatula, pause the game and warp to clean out the bumper boats again, and collect the spatula from Mr. Krabs for destroying the robots earlier. At this point, you should have somewhere around 19 golden spatulas, 50,000 shiny objects, and 6 socks. Now pause the game, scroll down to SpongeBob's Dream, and select the first spatula in the menu, across the dreamscape. We're just going to collect one spatula here, so it's not really worthy of a title card in my opinion. But this one trick that we're going to learn here is a damage boost to get to the bouncing ball spatula early. So we're back in the dream with the bubble bowl this time. And what we're going to do is climb up these blocks until we get to this one. Now this block with the spikes facing forward is what we're going to use to damage boost to the spatula. Jump on top of this block and quickly, because you need to bowl off the block while it's moving to get the maximum damage boost. Turn around and bowl off of this spike that's circled here. Now, if you recall in part 1, I mentioned that these spikes have individual hitboxes, so it is important that you bowl off of this specific one, as it's the least likely to send you off into the abyss or just straight up not give you a damage boost at all. So yeah, if you bowl off of this spike correctly, you should just get launched over to this platform with the spatula, and you can just double jump and spin to get on top of it. So now that you're on the platform, walk to the edge over here and face the golden spatula. To grab the spatula, you're going to have to push forward and do 2 full jumps. And again, I emphasize that you have to get the maximum height out of these, otherwise you're not going to be able to grab it. Also note that you have to physically touch the handle of the spatula to grab it, so it can be a little bit of a tight jump. So yeah, push forward and space 2 full jumps to grab the spatula. If you do it successfully, you should start hearing the cheering noises and he'll break into his celebration pose once he lands on the ground. Now, if you're having trouble with either the damage boost or the spatula grab, here are some alternatives you can do to make it easier. Climb up to the top platform, and then you can choose to go down the path if you're not having trouble with the spatula grab. Or you can bowl this wheel to spawn a ball, which you can follow down and then jump on to get to the spatula. The bouncing ball isn't that much slower if you're having trouble with the spatula, but if you end up using either of these alternatives, it would be beneficial to practice the damage boost and the spatula grab outside of runs, so that way you can implement them when you start getting more comfortable. Regardless of which way you chose to do this spatula, pause the game, scroll down to Mr. Krabs, and select the only silver spatula in the menu. When you load in, purchase all 8 spatulas from Mr. Krabs. And once the spatula counter says 28, head over to this fountain, double jump on top of it and bubble spin it on your way up. If you hit the fountain on the way up, the sock will spawn on top of you and attract you as you walk over to Shady Shoals. So now you should have 28 spatulas and 7 socks. Upon entering Shady Shoals, go to the right and enter Mermaid Man's couch. We will now begin learning the first segment of the Mermalair. Entering the Mermalair, the lobby section is mostly just walking in a straight line. However, there are some small things in this level that you should take note of, as they will be useful for the rest of the run. So even though we've had the Bubble Bowl for quite a bit now, this is sort of your introduction to universal Bubble Bowl tech. When you reach these blinking tiles, walk over the section that turns yellow, and time a bowling shot just before they turn red. This is a neat little optimization that'll damage boost you forward. Now you can jump around this electric gate, and when you reach this point on the ground, input another bowling shot forward, so that way you propel yourself into the cutscene as it starts. Now, bowling into cutscenes and area exits will be used a lot for the rest of the run. And this is because during this phase when you don't have control as the cutscene starts or as you're entering a level, the Bubble Bowl animation is still pushing you forward while you can't input anything. So it saves a little bit of time here and there. Now what you should not do is bowl into spatulas to collect them. This does not save time, because bowling into spatulas does not allow you to cancel the Bubble Bowl animation as you collect them. SpongeBob has 2 main parts to his bowling animation. The first half, which is the part where the ball comes out, and the second half, which can be canceled by walking. So if you're locked into collecting a spatula, you cannot cancel the second part of the Bubble Bowl animation as you can't input anything. So just keep these things in mind going forward. They may seem small, but they add up a lot over the course of the run. Now once you make it up to the platforms behind the ARF robot, we're going to set up the Mermalair lobby skip. This should be a relatively lenient trick as long as your full jumps and jump spacing are refined at this point in learning. Now to set this up, start walking past the rubble on the ground in the direction toward this bridge. Notice the little orange rectangle on the side of the bridge. Now walk in a straight line from the rubble to slightly left of the orange rectangle. And when you reach the edge of the platform outlined in purple, space 2 full jumps to grab the ledge slightly left to the orange rectangle. That's all there is to getting Mermalair lobby skip first try, but if you happen to miss it, there is a backup that you should know. So say at this point you're falling down, you want to make your way over to the wall over here and climb up the wall like this. You can climb up this geometry out of bounds like so, and when you reach the top you can space 2 full jumps to grab the platform that the spatula is on. This backup is for sure worth learning if you're struggling with the skip. So once you collect the spatula, you can go over and enter the Mermalair main chamber. And remember to bolt into the exit zone to save a little bit of time as you're mashing the input to enter a zone. Entering the Mermalair main chamber, you can use the bowling shot on this wheel to turn the platform. And much like damage boosting, you can also use the bubble bowl to boost yourself off of moving platforms. So when the moving platform with the wheel touches the next moving platform, you can push forward and bowl off the side of it to get a little bit of a boost. The fastest boost will come from bowling right as you walk off the platform. Now switch to Patrick and head over to the funnel machines. You have two options here. You can either walk around the TV to avoid Mermaid Man's text box, or talk to Mermaid Man to get his text box in case you fall off the platforms here. If you don't get Mermaid Man's text box, you're going to have to reload the level to the beginning of the main chamber, where you'll have to bowl the wheel and go all the way back there again. But if you get the text box, it only costs half a second to do, and you can just pause the game and reload to Mermaid Man. So do whichever you'd like, but I personally recommend getting the warp just because a half a second isn't much for a beginner, and the time that it would take to get back here is much more substantial. So for this first funnel machine, I'm going to slow it down a little bit just so you can see what we're doing. Walk to the edge of this second gray tile, and don't touch the red one, otherwise the melon will break and you'll have to go back and get another one. When you reach the edge, toss the melon forward, and make your way over to the circular platform where the button is. You will take damage from this, by the way, so don't worry if you get hurt. When you reach the circular platform, you will notice that the tiles will stop blinking. This is an exploit that ends the puzzle early. So you can turn around, grab the melon, do a 180, and throw the melon into the button. Now at this distance, there's a weird glitch where if you push forward and attack the melon in this direction, you can actually destroy it from over here. So face forward, destroy it, turn around, and head back to the main platform. This section can be a bit more tricky, so I'll give you more than one way to do it. This first method is the fastest method. You can walk across these two circular platforms while they're tilting, just as long as you stay centered between them as you walk across them. When you reach the second platform, toss the melon to the platform with the button. The alternative way to get the melon to this platform is by walking up to the purple edge of this platform and tossing the melon onto the second platform. Then you can go to the second platform, pick up the melon, and toss it to the platform with a button on it. This is the section during which you're at the highest risk of falling. So if this is something that concerns you, make sure you get the Mermaid Man warp before doing these. When the melon's on that platform with the button, you're going to have to be quick to get over there, pick it up, and throw it at the button before it breaks. Turn around and head back to the main platform. This one is pretty easy as long as you stick to the plan. Grab the melon and walk along the purple edge of this platform. And when you get deep enough to the point where the cannon can't hit you, toss the melon to the button and you've successfully activated all three funnels. Now when you head back to Mermaid Man, he's going to teleport you behind him, from where you should purchase the clam that's right next to you. After purchasing the clam, collect the golden spatula, pick up the melon, and use the catapult to launch yourself up to the towers of power. This section is going to be a lot easier than you remember from your casual experience. All you have to do is start on the left and hit every button in a row by slamming on them. So just slam every button from left to right, and head back to Barnacle Boy as the cutscene plays. Collect the spatula from him, and we'll start setting up the Mermalair main chamber skip. Now, as I've done before, I've prepared a video for you guys to watch on how to do this, so I'll go ahead and interject that now. Have a look. To start, face this direction in front of the slide and walk forward. If you have the correct angle, Patrick should slide into the corner and get stuck. Stay in this corner to build speed for around 5 seconds. During this time, pay attention to this lamp that's attached to the slide in the distance. After 5 seconds, jump to land right in front of this lamp and pull your control stick to the right to fall off the slide. Immediately after Patrick leaves the slide, perform a full jump toward the bridge in the distance. By full jump, I mean holding down the jump button rather than just tapping it in order to maximize your jumps. If you did this successfully, you should be able to delay and space the second jump to reach the gate to the containment system. As you follow over the gate, mash the trigger, button, or bumper that's used to enter. Note that on the GameCube version, entering an area is triggered by pressing the analog section of the bumper, not the digital pad under the bumper. So when you mash on GameCube, try to mash only the top section of the bumper. I've come across people who have tried learning the skip despite having the bridge activated from shutting down the security system. And you actually can learn this trick with the bridge down. Just make sure that you're aiming for the correct part of the bridge with the gate on it. Most commonly, people mess this up by not turning far enough right to reach the trigger. This can be fixed by falling off the slide a bit more before jumping, so Patrick has more turning freedom by being further removed from the slide. Less commonly, people mess this up by turning too far right. This is really easy to fix though. Just take a less extreme angle and make sure you're aiming for the gate. And remember, when you make that first jump after building your speed, make sure you're aiming for the lamp out in the distance. By the way, this area can be pretty dark, so if you can't see what you're doing, try turning up the brightness on your TV. It sounds tedious, but it can help a lot when you're learning the skip. Now before you actually attempt the main chamber skip, remember to hit this button that's behind Barnacle Boy. Despite being able to skip to the prawn fight, you still have to activate all 4 of these buttons to get a golden spatula from the Mermalair computer. So hit that button and you can start setting up the Mermalair chamber skip as it was described in the mini tutorial you just watched. So now that you've entered the villain containment system, turn around and exit back to the main chamber. The purpose of doing this was to activate the warp for later, because in part 3 we're going to use exploits called cruise boosting and L clipping to skip this fight. So once you're back in the main chamber, head right to the security tunnel entrance, and remember to keep bowling into those exit zones so you can save a little bit of time on each one. Security tunnel skip will be the hardest skip we'll cover in this level, and much like I said in the main chamber skip tutorial, keep the brightness on your TV up for this trick, because it's not only super dark in this level for some consoles, but you'll also need to see the textures on the walls to understand how to do this skip. And by the way, once I'm finished explaining the primary methods for skipping security tunnel, I will show an alternative for the first level skip and the second level skip. So if you struggle with the methods I'm about to teach, just hang in there and I'll show the simplified methods after. Leading up to this skip, destroy the hammer bot with a bowling shot and dodge the Chuck's attack. If you have to destroy the Chuck while learning this trick, just go over there and attack him with a bubble bash. That's also fine. Whatever it takes for you to practice it without being disturbed. Now you'll notice the sharp geometry on this platform we're going to use. Think of the geometry here as a pointer, and you're going to run off the geometry in the direction of the pointer for this trick. Notice the flower texture etched into the wall. Run off the pointer, space 2 full jumps and a spin to reach the flower. Once you land on the flower, turn yourself more to the right and perform 2 more full jumps and a spin while pushing forward, which should in most cases land you on this invisible ledge. Sometimes you may have to try very slightly different angles facing this direction to make it work. It's pretty feel-based, so you should experiment with it for yourself. But once you've landed on this ledge, double jump to the next section of the security tunnel. Now, the next section skip is a damage boost. Stand on the edge of this geometry right here, and wait for the electric beam coming out of this turret to pass over you. Now, this might seem obvious to some people, but to get SpongeBob to bash through the electric here, you have to press the bash button slightly before the electricity goes over you, so that way it moves over you just as you reach the peak of your bash. And then time a double jump to land over the little peg that's extruding from the turret. Note that you have to jump onto this peg to be able to get up onto the cliff. If you land on the base of the turret, you won't have enough height to get up to the cliff. If you miss this jump the first time, the turret is on a cycle that'll actually turn around and meet you again if you stay in the same spot. So you can just try it again once it arrives. There are actually multiple spots here where you can do this, but be careful because there are some spots where it doesn't work. If you're bashing into the electricity and just getting sent straight down, you might be timing your jump too early. So try to wait a little bit longer after being hurt to double jump out of it. If you happen to land on the base of the turret, you might also be able to quickly jump onto the peg and then jump up to the cliff from the peg. There are a lot of ways of doing this considering this is a very movement-based skip, so just toy around with it and see what works for you. And as mentioned earlier, I'll now show the alternatives for level 1 and level 2. Unfortunately, the only alternative for level 2 is going through the second part of the tunnel, but there's really no shame in having to do that as a beginner. There's plenty of time to work on the second level skip outside of runs and implement it to your runs later. Once you reach the top of the security tunnel, make sure you don't get killed by this ARF bot lurking around here. Just attack it from the distance to get him to move away from the button. Walk up to the button at around this distance, and fully charge a bowling shot to hit it. The collision for the button is pretty indented here, so you're going to have to really charge that bowling ball to get it to force its way in there. But once you've hit that button, collect the spatula for completing the security tunnel and enter the rolling ballroom. Now here, it is very important that you get the warp from Mr. Krabs by talking to him. We need the cruise bubble to clip into the rolling ballroom case, so we're gonna have to come back later. In the meantime, make sure you hit this button on the way out, and then head over to this gate that'll send you to the Mermalair computer. The rest of this is simple. Just collect the golden spatula, bowl the final button, and then collect the golden spatula that is awarded to you for shutting down the security system. You have now completed Mermalair 1. Pause the game, scroll up to Bikini Bottom, and select the second spatula in the menu, on top of Shady Shoals. Rock Bottom 1 is again another level where we're only collecting one spatula, so I again figured it not necessary to put a title card here. For entering this level, quickly stand on this pad and bowl the button to activate the trampoline. It is extremely important, however, that you bowl this button before entering Rock Bottom, because you need to watch this cutscene now, as opposed to later. The reason why is because this cutscene will interrupt your block cycle for climbing Shady Shoals before Sand Mountain later. And not only does this save you from waiting later, it also lets you save a little bit of time by bouncing over the Rock Bottom taxi pad, which will allow you to save time entering Rock Bottom by accepting the taxi prompt while the cutscene's playing. The one trick we're covering in Rock Bottom 1 is Bathroom Boost, which damage boosts SpongeBob off a Sleepy Time's attack to sequence break Rock Bottom and unlock the Trench of Advanced Darkness early. Now to start this off, you have to break this floating tiki to knock these two wooden tikis down, which will create some steps to get on top of the bathroom. Be careful not to enter the zone where the Sleepy Time detects you, because getting hit will cause the Sleepy Time to start roaming around, and you can't set up the damage boost while it's moving. If this happens to you, pause the game, reload the level, and try again. Also, do not destroy the Sleepy Time robot, otherwise it won't respawn and you won't be able to do the trick. But anyway, use the wooden tikis to get on top of the restrooms. Now once SpongeBob walks past the pole under the right side of the sign, you'll have to fall into the detection zone for the Sleepy Time, while still retaining your single jump. So this also goes back to that jump spacing we talked about in part 0, where you have to walk off the ledge just far enough to get noticed by the Sleepy Time, but also still retain your ability to single jump. So once the Sleepy Time notices you, immediately jump back onto the bathroom, and the laser beam will shoot you into the sign. Between being hit this first time and being hit the second time, you need to jump on top of the sign, between the two characters that resemble an M and a Z. If you stand on the edge of the sign, like shown here, the second attack from the Sleepy Time will knock you off the restrooms, and slide you against the platform, from which, just like with oil skip, you can either mash or time the bash button, and you'll retain your momentum over this gap. While you're airborne, if you get enough speed, you can double jump and land on top of the hot sauce, which will extend your damage boost, and then you can double jump out of that again, to extend the boost even farther. This is one of the most fun tricks for beginners to learn, because it's very lenient and super flashy. All you have to do now is exit the level over here, which will put you in the exit zone for the Trench of Advanced Darkness, and there will be a spatula to collect. Now once you got the spatula, pause the game, scroll up to Bikini Bottom, and warp back to Shady Shoals. We'll return to Rock Bottom in part 3 to finish off the Trench of Advanced Darkness and downtown Rock Bottom with cruise boosting. Because you activated the Shady Shoals cutscene earlier, bowling the button this time will just spawn the blocks and you'll be able to jump on them immediately. You're going to have to be quick for this, otherwise you won't be able to make the fastest cycle. So bowl the button and quickly jump on the trampoline as it's spawning, turn around, and head to the blocks. Keep in mind, by the way, that the cycle for these blocks begins when you load into the level, not when you press the button. So even if the blocks aren't activated, they're still invisible and turning. This is why as soon as you load into the level, you have to quickly hit that button and get onto the trampoline as quickly as possible. If you're on the fastest block cycle, it should look something like this. Now once you've collected the spatula on top of Shady Shoals, extend 2 full jumps and a spin over the Sand Mountain taxi pad, which is on the ground right behind Shady Shoals. Much like for the Rock Bottom taxi pad, if you fall on top of it, you'll be able to call the taxi pad while the cutscene's playing, sending you to Sand Mountain. Okay, so Sand Mountain is a relatively self-explanatory segment. The tricks in this level aren't very difficult, but you still need to pay attention to this part because we collect a lot of socks and you can't miss any of them. To collect the first sock, jump off this ledge and hit the Sandman. Make sure that you do collect this though, because I've actually seen people walk past this sock without collecting it. Okay, walk up to the door for Guppy Mound, purchase it, and enter. When you load in, make sure that you accept the time challenge. I've also seen people just not accept the time challenge here. Now, just as a reminder before you go down the slide, if you've rebooted your console at any point during this tutorial learning process, you might not still have your hand disabled. So if this applies to you, go back to Bikini Bottom and disable the hand before going down the slide. Also, here's some more bubble bowl tech for you. If you bowl down a slide right as you walk onto it, you accelerate to full speed much faster. So when you walk onto the slide to start the time challenge, and you'll notice it again later when we go off the track, make sure you fire a bowling shot to speed yourself up. The first half of the slide is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Just make sure that you collect this sock on this ledge, and hit the approaching red button on the ground as well.
Victory.
This summons a sandball to land on the wall of Thunder Tikis. On this part of the slide, we're going to have a couple of major track jumps, and if you're struggling with either of these, don't worry about using them in runs because they don't save much time, and are more so just small optimizations. The first jump through the billboard can be done by running off the slide and spacing 2 full jumps. The second jump can be more tricky if you're not on the Xbox version. Because the draw distance for NPCs is significantly lowered on the PlayStation 2 and GameCube versions, the Chuck that's guarding this part of the slope will spawn in later if you're on those consoles. This means that he'll notice you later and therefore have greater accuracy for throwing his missile as you jump off the slide in this part to skip the next section. So to avoid this, you have to understand how the Chuck's AI works. On the frame that the Chuck throws the missile, it'll be sent to the direction that you're currently headed. So if you're already jumping off the ledge at this point, it'll throw the missile to meet you in the spot where you're jumping. However, if you're still pushing down the slide when the missile's thrown, it'll throw the missile behind itself because it predicts that you're going in that direction. So push forward until the missile leaves its hand, then veer off to the left, and space 2 full jumps off the track to cut through the rock. And under the track there will be a sock for you to collect. The rest of the time challenge is pretty self-explanatory. Just pay attention toward the end of the slide because there is a sock off the track, and you have to collect it. After collecting the sock, you should have 11 of them.
Morning. Smells like victory.
After going through the finish line, double jump and let go of your analog stick to let SpongeBob slide across the ice. If you give analog input while sliding on the ice, SpongeBob will slow down. Unlike the robot guarding the button in Jellyfish Fields, we have to actually destroy these robots to be able to hit the buttons behind them. So spin this first robot, turn and face this direction, and aim a fully charged bowling shot to this rock. Now if the robots on the ice don't get in the way of the shot, it'll ramp off the rock and hit the Thunder Tiki, which will blow it up and cause the robot next to it to explode, revealing the second button. So while this is going on, you can turn around and bowl the button that you revealed earlier, and then skate across the arena to the other button. Hit that one, and a sandball will drop to destroy the fence. Now you can go grab the golden spatula, and when you're finished with that, jump in the teleport box, which will bring you back to Mrs. Puff, and she will give you a spatula as well. Now walk over to the exit for Guppy Mound, leave the level and walk in this direction. When you reach this cliff, you'll notice that if you look down, there's a golden spatula in the pit. However, there's also a Chuck guarding it. So with what I taught you about Chuck manipulation earlier, avoid its missile attack, double jump into the pit, and collect the golden spatula. And by the way, you just did Frosty Bungee Skip. Not particularly difficult. But if you do end up getting hit by Chuck, you'll unfortunately have to pause the game and warp back to Guppy Mound, leave Guppy Mound, and then walk all the way back here to try again. So just make sure you get that spatula first try. Okay, so that was a pretty quick one. Now pause the game, scroll up to Bikini Bottom, and select the 7th spatula in the menu, Infestation at the Krusty Krab. The beginning of the Krusty Krab fight again tests your Chuck manipulations. So bait him to throw the missile away from you, make your way around the table, and hit him with the spin attack. Now stepping on this Thunder Tiki that's under the Shush Tikis will ignite it and then cause the Shush Tikis to expand when you walk away. Therefore, the Shush Tikis will push the Thunder Tiki up to the top level, where the Sleepy Time will be in range of the explosion. So basically that means if you touch this Thunder Tiki and walk away from it, it'll do the work for you. Note here that there's another Chuck floating around the upper level of the Krusty Krab. He will notice you when you jump over the cash register. So again, we have to manipulate him. Where we're currently headed is on top of the storage wall. So therefore, we have to lure the Chuck's missile away from that wall. As you're running to the condiment stand, push slightly right on the analog stick so the Chuck's missile goes away from the wall. Then jump on top of the condiments, and for this part you're going to have to be pretty quick, otherwise the Sleepy Time will knock you off the wall. Stay as close to the wall as possible, push forward and double jump toward the Sleepy Time, and if you time your spin attack correctly, you should be able to destroy the Sleepy Time before he attacks you. If he does get you though, you have to jump off the wall and run away from his laser beam, otherwise he'll just keep hitting you until you die. Once the sleepy time's gone, jump on top of this wooden beam and aim a fully charged bubble bowl into the Thunder Tiki sitting by this Duplicatotron. Most of the time, you will be able to destroy the Chuck as well with this Thunder Tiki, but sometimes the blast won't get him because he's floating outside the range. In this case, you'll have to wait for the Duplicatotron to blow up and then go after him with a spin attack. Once the top part of the Krusty Krab is cleared, jump down to the bottom level and take care of the Bizbots. Usually at this point there will be 4 of them roaming around. If you're low on health, try jumping on top of the barrels and tables to avoid their attacks. And you can also kind of block their attacks by standing behind the tables and barrels as well. Once you've cleared the bottom floor and you see the yellow text over the screen with the fanfare, pause the game and warp to the first spatula in Bikini Bottom. This will automatically teleport you to Mr. Krabs, who will be outside of the Krusty Krab, so you can collect your 40th spatula and therefore have enough to enter the industrial park, which we are going to enter from the back by walking up to this toll gate and jumping on top of the rotator here. Oh yeah, and before you enter the industrial park, make sure that you have 11 socks. If you don't have this number, check back in this video to figure out which ones you missed. I've been calling for sock checks pretty frequently, so if you don't have 11, it's most likely that you missed some in Sand Mountain. And with that, we will enter industrial park and fight RoboPatrick to obtain the cruise bubble power.
Do-si-do and around you go. That hot glue could melt anything. Oh, that's gotta sting.
Like a new spot.
It looks like SpongeBob has an opportunity here.
For Phase 1 of Industrial Park, all you have to know is that RoboPatrick's signature spin attack will last for exactly 10 seconds. So you can count to 10 yourself or use your timer, but after 10 seconds you should already be charging a bowling shot to hit him. That's really all there is to this phase, but in Phase 2 things get a bit more complicated. Now I will introduce you to a strategy called swing stalling. Swing stalling allows you to abuse the Texas swingers to hover over the arena while Patrick is spinning. Each time you lasso the swinger, boxes will drop onto the arena, and these boxes are especially useful for hitting Patrick for the next 2 hits. So to start a swing stall, jump off the ground and lasso the swinger, then double jump and lasso again, and keep doing this until you're above the swinger. At this point you can keep jumping and lassoing, which will continuously drop boxes and allow you to stay above the map in safety. So once Patrick stops spinning after the 10 seconds, hit him and go back to the main platform.
Take that.
Now what you'll want here is at least 1 box dropped in front of this platform, but if you don't have any boxes dropped, this skip will work just fine if you stand on the edge of the main platform. So stand on the platform or on this box and wait for Patrick to drop the goo. Once he lands, he'll start to vomit, so now you want to time your jump with when he starts vomiting and just purposefully get hit by it. This trick is used to skip the vomit cycle after every hit in the sandy phase. So now that the goo is up, you've lost a little bit of freedom to walk on the ground, but this doesn't matter because you're going to be swing stalling anyway. So let him shoot his goo and make your way back up to the top of the swinger and continue swing stalling while he spins. Now hits 2 and 3 are a bit more tricky because he might land in a spot where boxes are not dropped. In this case, when he's done spinning, glide over to the area where he landed and swing on the closest swinger to him a couple of times. This will cause some boxes to drop near him, which will keep you safe from drowning.
Look at that! The robots.
After hitting him, quickly jump up and glide over to the nearest lasso. If you still have some boxes dropped down here, just go stand on those, and then he'll start his vomit cycle again, which you will interrupt by jumping into it. Repeat the strategies from the second hit for the third hit, but just make sure that you don't drown after the third hit. You can still take damage after Patrick is hit for the third time, because the third phase is not triggered by Patrick being hit. It's triggered by Patrick grabbing the lever to drop the goo for the third time. So after that third hit, just stay alive and let him do his thing. Also, here's a reminder to stay out of his way whenever he goes for the lever during these hits, because sometimes he will knock you off the boxes and you'll drown. Moving on to Phase 3, which is the part that most people struggle with. You can stand on the edge of this platform or jump out closer to him, but either way, this will skip the third vomit cycle. Once you take your hit, start moving to the far left corner of the ring. This manipulation does require a bit of fast movement, so don't worry if you're not doing this perfectly for your first runs. So jump over his freezing attack and avoid his goo attack, and you should end up on the back conveyor belt like this. Now stay standing in this corner while Patrick starts to spin, and stay there until the spinning begins. Once he starts spinning, run back to the main platform in anticipation for him to land. The reason why we start the manipulation on this platform is because from his center position, RoboPatrick will end up either in the front of the main platform or on the right side of the stage. So this is why we're headed in this direction. So in this case, he did end up on the far right side of the stage. For these bowling shots, push forward and charge the bubble bowl against the conveyor belts. This will keep you in a relatively similar position while you charge up, and as you fully charge, just turn your control stick in the direction of Robopatrick's back and release. These bowling shots will take some time to get down, so don't worry if you're not perfect at them for your first run. After Robopat takes the hit, continue around the conveyor belts until you get to this corner, which is on the opposite side of the corner we used earlier, and do the same thing. Walk in place and let him start spinning. Once he starts spinning, run in the direction of the conveyor belts, which, if you're fast enough, should get you to the left side of the stage. For this hit, Robopatrick is most likely to land on the left side of the stage or the main platform. And for this specific one, he landed on the main platform. So you can jump to the main platform over here, which is not a very long walk away, and charge a bowling shot into his back. For the final hit, go back to the first corner we used, on the far left side of the stage. Repeat the same manipulation, and he should land on the front platform or the right side of the stage. So again, much like for the first hit, start running in the direction of the conveyor belts and meet him at the right side or the main platform. And again, he lands on the right side where you can shoot your final shot. There is a lot of variation in this fight, so it can take many hours to fully understand how this fight works and all of its possible outcomes. However, this is not something I'd recommend just grinding solo, but rather just paying attention to where he goes during your actual runs. This is the kind of thing that'll come with experience. And besides, I recommend setting your practice time aside for the more difficult hit or miss tricks, like the kinds of things we're about to cover in the next section of the video. Oh, and by the way, congratulations on finishing part 2. I know for most of you out there following along, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. So take a break if you need one, but if not, let's get right into part 3. And yes, that means it is time to start cruise boosting.
So you've learned a few fancy jumps and skips and think you can speed run Battle for Bikini Bottom? You won't even make it out of Jellyfish fields with that attitude. If you're going to win this war, you need to use every weapon at your disposal. And the most mighty weapon that any soldier on the front lines possesses is the Cruise Boost. A seasoned Cruise Booster will pass any obstacle with ease and leave the competition in the dust. It's not easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. Now get out there, soldier. We've got a war to win.
So before entering part 3, we need to cover cruise boosting. This trick is used many times throughout the rest of the run, so I figured it necessary to dedicate an entire segment to it. I believe that the most important aspect of this trick is knowledge. If you understand how cruise boosting works, it makes getting one that much easier. And I just want to establish now that cruise boosting works exactly the same on every version of this game. Regardless of whether you're playing on the GameCube, PlayStation 2, or Xbox version, the inputs, movement, and frame rate are all exactly the same. Let's start with the absolute basics. So at this point in the tutorial, you've used the bubble bowl quite a bit, and you may have noticed that when you use the bubble bowl and you push forward, you launch forward quite a bit. This is because the bubble bowl has its own separate movement speed, which we will refer to as bowl speed. And while walking forward and using the bubble bowl, you are using that walking speed to make your bowling speed faster. So what you should take from this is that when SpongeBob is bowling, there are two forces acting on his total speed, his walking speed and his bowling speed. Now just to make sure we're caught up at this point, I'll show you a simulation that can explain this visually. And by the way, if you're interested in checking out more work from the guy who made this simulation, you can find him on Twitter at SatchelQuinn. So back to how bowling speed works. In the simulator, bowling speed is indicated by the orange values, the walking or movement speed is indicated by the purple numbers, and your total speed or de facto speed is indicated by the green numbers. So if you stand still and fire a bowling shot in the simulator, you see that his movement speed values do not change, however the bowling speed values spike up for a little bit. This is because you're giving no movement input while you're also giving bowling input. Now as I walk forward, you'll notice the movement value will increase, and my total speed should be set to equal my movement value. Now when I bowl out of this, you'll notice that there's a temporary spike in the total speed as the bowling speed rises. This is again because your total speed equals your movement speed plus your bowling speed. You got that? Okay, moving on. So now that we understand how the game calculates total speed, let's start talking about cruise boosting. What does it actually do? If you've seen runs of the game before, you know what it looks like, but do you really know what's happening under the hood? Well, let's start by saying that cruise boosting is a glitch that allows you to lock your bowling speed at a certain value by inputting the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame. In Battle for Bikini Bottom, the game runs at 60 frames per second on all versions. This means that you have 1/60th of a second window to press the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame to lock whatever bowling speed speed value you have at that given frame. And to clarify, your bowling speed is based on how fast you're moving on the frame that you bowled. So I'll show you another example just to make sure we're all caught up. So when I fire a bowling shot in the simulator, you'll notice the bowling speed goes up to this value initially. So if I do the same bowling shot, but I use the cruise bubble on the exact frame that I do it, the cruise bubble cancels the bowling ball animation, and the bowling speed gets locked into that same initial value you saw earlier. This is a cruise boost, however, it's still not useful for runs because it's not fast enough. So if you understand how this works so far, let's start talking about how to get a fast cruise boost. So let's put together those two things we discussed earlier. Bowling speed is determined by how fast you're moving on the frame that you used it, and you can use the cruise bubble to cancel the bubble bowl if you do it on the same frame you use the bubble bowl. So if you're walking at full speed and you use the bubble bowl, you'll get a faster bowling shot than if you were standing still. And the bowling speed that we want to lock onto our total speed is the same value of speed that we get from walking forward and bowling. So how can we accomplish this? If you guess that you have to walk forward and use the cruise bubble and the bubble bowl on the same frame, that's actually wrong. Because if you're walking forward and SpongeBob is not against a flat surface, the bubble bowl will prioritize over the cruise bubble and therefore not allow the cruise bubble to cancel the bubble bowl. So in basic terms, in order to get a fast cruise boost, you have to lock the bowling speed that is produced by walking and bowling at the same time, while also being against the flat surface. So if we walk against a flat surface like this wall and use the cruise bubble and the bubble bowl on the same frame, you will get a cruise boost, however, it'll still be slow. And this is because the wall is obstructing you from moving forward, so therefore the bowling shot can't give you more speed, because walking against the wall is making you not really move at all. Does that make sense? So it seems counterintuitive that you need to walk against a wall in order to get a fast cruise boost, but walking against a wall like this makes you walk slowly. So you might be wondering how this is even possible. Well, let's remember earlier that I said that you need to be against a flat surface, not necessarily walking into the wall. There are two more important aspects of SpongeBob's movement that you have to understand to perform this part of the trick. First off, when SpongeBob is performing a bowling shot, the game makes him turn at 1/10 of his normal speed. This mechanic was likely added to make it easier for people to aim a bowling shot, because if you could turn as fast as you normally can while you're using a bowling shot, the average casual player would probably have a very hard time aiming. And secondly, you don't necessarily have to be walking forward to produce movement speed. You can actually walk in any direction. So by walking against the wall initially and using the cruise bubble and bubble ball on the same frame, you can lock that really slow bowling speed just to get that slow turning effect. The reason why the slow turning effect from the bubble bowl is still transferred to your cruise boost is because using the cruise bubble and bubble bowl on the same frame not only locks your bowling speed, but also your turning speed. So now that you're turning at 1/10 of your normal speed, you can move from left to right while still facing the wall. Do you see where I'm getting at here? Because earlier I mentioned that you don't have to necessarily be walking forward to get your movement speed. You can instead walk from side to side. Ah, look at that. So with your initial slow cruise boost and 1/10 of your turning speed, you can walk from side to side against the wall to get that walking speed required to produce the fast bowling shot while still technically facing against a flat surface. So, in order to get that fast cruise boost, pull the control stick against the surface of the wall that's facing closest to the camera. The reason why you can't do this the other way around is because walking in the direction of the wall that's farther forward will just pull you away from the wall. Meanwhile, pushing into the side of the wall that's closest to your point of view will kind of glide you against the wall. So you're still against a flat surface and you're still moving at your walking speed. So make sure you're careful to push against the correct side of the wall and make sure your analog stick is not too far forward or too far back. Ideally, you want the control stick to be all the way to one side, but just slightly above the x-axis. This is the same for whether you're pulling to the left side or the right side. If you push too far up on the control stick while you're sliding, you won't move as fast against the wall because you're pushing more forward into it than to the left or right. So therefore, if you use the bubble bowl and cruise bubble on the same frame to capture that speed, you'll just get a slower cruise boost. Likewise, pulling too far back on the control stick isn't good either, because then you have the same problem I mentioned earlier that's produced by walking onto the incorrect side of the wall. It forms a space gap between you and the wall, so you're no longer facing against a flat surface. You need to pull the control stick slightly above the x-axis, so that way SpongeBob glides across the surface that's closest to your point of view. So let's start from the top again. Walk against the wall, and take note of which side of the wall is facing closest to the camera. Now, the wall should be almost flat, but not quite flat, so it might be hard to tell which side of the wall is closest to the camera by just looking. Another way of determining this is by walking into the wall and seeing which way you get pushed. If walking straight into the wall pushes you to the left, it means that that side of the wall is farther away from the camera. Likewise, if walking into the wall pushes you to the right, it means that that side of the wall is farthest from the camera, which is why you're able to walk forward into it. So now, once you're sliding against the wall like this, execute the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame. I must emphasize here to keep pushing forward on the control stick while you're doing this. Make sure that you continue walking forward while you execute the cruise bubble and the bubble bowl on the same frame. Now once you've done this, if you're on the GameCube or Xbox versions, the winding sound that comes from the bowling shot will go into an infinite loop. On the PS2 version, you won't be able to hear this, however you can still tell on all three versions whether it worked or not if you get a very slight sliding effect into the wall, and if moving from left to right generally keeps you facing toward the wall. Now once you have this first cruise boost, again, take note of which side of the wall is closest to the camera. Now angle your control stick, again, in the direction of the wall, but slightly above the x-axis. And as you pull in that direction, execute the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame. And in other terms, if you're not quite understanding this explanation, when executing the second cruise boost, you need to pull into the opposite direction from the direction you were pushed doing the original one straight against the wall. You can also do the same thing if walking straight into the wall pushes you in the opposite direction. So if you're drifting to the right after your first cruise boost, pull to the left while doing your second one. And remember to keep your control stick all the way to one side, slightly above the x-axis. If you do this correctly, you should achieve a fast cruise boost. Now that you understand how this works, I'm going to explain how to activate it even faster. Since you can't move during the cruise bubble animation, you can actually buffer your next analog input by, for example, if you're being pushed to the left by your first cruise boost, pull to the right during the cruise bubble animation, and once the cruise bubble animation finishes, you'll already be pulling in that direction. So you can time your second cruise boost to go off immediately after it ends. So if you do it all in one smooth motion, it should look like this. If you find yourself facing too far away from the wall with your first cruise boost, you can actually fire a bowling shot to get rid of it and start over. I'll explain in more detail why this works later, but just know for now it's an option to get rid of it. You can also pause the game and rewarp to the level you're in. This will not only get rid of your cruise boost, but it'll also clear the winding sounds that have built up over time. So if it's getting annoying to you at some point, you can just rewarp and start over. Now obviously getting this will take some practice, and likewise noticing when you have a fast cruise boost will take practice as well. So the easiest way to tell whether you have a fast one or not is by wiggling the control stick backward around the bottom of the y-axis. And if you get some kind of a moonwalking effect from this, that means that your captured bowling speed isn't fast enough to completely counteract your walking speed, so that imbalance causes you to run backward. And this will become more obvious when I explain how cruise boost movement works. But before we get into that, I want to show you the simulator again, just so I can give you a visual on the relationship between these speeds. So this orange arrow facing forward on SpongeBob is the visual representation of his bowling speed vector, and the cyan arrow, on the other hand, is your movement speed or analog input. So when these two vectors are working together, SpongeBob gets that fast movement speed as shown here, but when they're working against each other, SpongeBob just runs in place, because his bowling speed and movement speed are equal to each other. This is the sign of a good cruise boost because you captured your exact movement speed when you were sliding against the wall. The sign of a bad cruise boost is when your bowling speed isn't quite fast enough to completely counteract your movement speed, so that imbalance, as shown here, causes SpongeBob to move backward. Regardless of how fast your cruise boost is, these basic movement properties I'm about to explain still apply. In cruise boost state, bowling speed will apply to all of your actions, including the cruise bubble, bubble bowl, bubble bounce, and bubble bash, which causes you to move around while doing these actions, despite not giving any movement input on the control stick. These actions all function a bit differently, however. A cruise boosted bubble bounce will still suspend you in midair temporarily, however with the added bowling speed, it'll push you forward. So this means that the bubble bounce can be used to extend your jumps, much like we've used the spin attack for earlier earlier in the tutorial. And yes, the spin attack still does the same thing here, but you can use it to extend your jumps even farther while you're cruise boosting. Bashing takes on the same properties as well. A cruise boosted bubble bash can be used as a super jump, which sends you way higher than a normal double jump would, and allows you to climb up objects which were previously unclimbable. Using the cruise bubble in a cruise boosted state, however, unless you're stationary against an object, may cause it to come out temporarily for an instant and then disappear. This is because the cruise bubble automatically cancels itself while you're moving. This is likely the same reason why you have to be against the wall to get a cruise boost in the first place, by the way, just to help cement your understanding of the trick. Now, bubble bowling is an interesting one, because using the bubble bowl in a cruise boosted state does boost the speed of the bowling shot. However, it ends the infinite loop of the bowling shot you use to cruise boost, and therefore restores your speed to 0, effectively ending your cruise boost. Now, you may be thinking this is bad, but it's not necessarily bad, because cruise boosting does place limitations on your ability to turn, as we mentioned earlier with the 1/10 modifier, and it also still pushes you around while you have no control of your character. So if you grab a spatula while you're in a cruise boosting state, SpongeBob will continue moving around despite you having no control over him. So in some situations, it's actually desirable to use a bowling shot to get rid of your cruise boost before collecting a spatula. There are several other ways of getting rid of your cruise boost as well, such as taking damage, touching goo, dying, or switching characters. Now that you understand how to manipulate cruise boost movement and how this movement affects your moveset, we need to talk about how to use them effectively. So now that we have the bubble bounce and bash available for platforming, we can string moves together very differently. For example, to cross some gaps, you can start with a cruise boosted bash, into a double jump, into a spin, into a slam. You can also double jump, spin, slam. Or bash, spin, double jump, slam. As you can see, there are many options here for creativity. As long as your cruise boost speed is fast enough, the platforming and jumping gaps shouldn't be too difficult with a cruise boost, at least with the movement covered in this tutorial. But what you might find more difficulty doing is standing still with a cruise boost, because as we covered already, it's constantly pushing you forward. So if you recall my example earlier where the two vectors were counteracting each other, you can actually use this as a method for standing still. So while facing forward, wiggle the control stick back at the bottom of the Y-axis, and with enough practice you should be able to have SpongeBob stand in place like this. You can also turn the control stick very slowly to have SpongeBob turn in place. This is a really good exercise to practice control with cruise boosting, because a sure sign of an experienced player is one that has complete control over how fast they're moving with the cruise boost. Now with that said, there are still some moments where cruise boosting is not advantageous, such as areas with a lot of turning, or areas where the time it takes to cruise boost counteracts the amount of time it would actually save to use it. There's still a lot of strategy factoring into when to use a cruise boost, how fast it needs to be, when to get rid of it, even down to which way you have to face the camera while you're grabbing a spatula. So throughout part 3 where we discuss cruise boost movement, make sure you pay attention to the little details in each segment, because even though cruise boosting is essentially just one trick, each one is very different, and that is also why I advise you to not spend too much time practicing it before learning the rest of the run. Just get it down to the point where you think you understand how it works, and then start learning part 3, because you'll find that practicing cruise boosting in the various spots that I point out in the tutorial will be much more helpful for you than just practicing it in the same spot over and over again. The surfaces change, the angles change, and your execution will change. And if you go back and rewatch this section of the video, you'll notice that I showed several different spots to cruise boost on just to demonstrate that point. So keep all of this in mind, and if you're struggling with cruise boosting, reference back this point in the video, because this is by far the most important trick to understand when running this game, and especially when entering this next section. Let's just say with adequate practice, these next 36 spatulas will go by way faster than the first 41. But for now, don't rush learning these tricks in the next section, because section 3 of this tutorial is overall much harder than the previous two. Just keep that in mind going forward, take breaks if you need to, and stay motivated. We left off defeating RoboPatrick and learning how to cruise boost. So now we're going to start backtracking to all the levels that we started before and finish them off with our new ability. So after getting the default text box from Plankton after finishing Industrial Park, pause the game, scroll down to Jellyfish Fields, and select the 4th spatula in the menu, Patrick's Dilemma. Keep in mind going through these levels that you can't cruise boost on every wall. So I've picked out walls that are accessible to learn on while also being fast. Make sure you focus on these walls that I picked out for learning. Now to start off, get a cruise boost off of this wall and jump into this box. If you open the connected box during Jellyfish Fields 1 when you did Dilemma Skip, it should teleport you to the bottom of the slide. Now here you'll have your first challenge for jump spacing with a cruise boost. And there is one more thing I have to teach you about cruise boosting before we do this. As long as you spin attack before running off a ledge and it's the final action you do before jumping, you can delay the time that it takes for SpongeBob to fall, therefore allowing SpongeBob to run off the ledge for longer while still maintaining your ability to jump. So if your cruise boost is fast enough, which can be tested by wiggling back on the control stick as I taught you earlier, face forward to your destination off the cliff, use a spin attack, run off the ledge, and perform a full jump, a full double jump, a spin, and then a slam. If you space these out properly, you should be able to land on the sand. If you happen to drown while doing this, there will be a box behind you when you respawn that's suitable for cruise boosting. So you can use that to get another one before trying again. If you're having trouble with jumping over this way, try this method instead. Now that you're out of bounds on the sand, run in this direction until you reach the end of the cave. Then jump into this little area that's off the sand. Be aware of the goo that's sticking out here because you can drown in it. So once you land on this platform, use a bowling shot to get rid of your cruise boost and turn around to face these thunder tikis. If you're perfectly flat against this geometry, you should be able to double jump into this ledge and grab through the floor of the slide. Now I'll offer you 2 ways of getting this spelunking spatula. The first way, and easier way, is walking up to the top platform here, using the cruise bubble to open the gate, and jumping into the spatula behind it. If you want more of a challenge and to save more time, after clipping back into the map, turn around and there should be a box behind you. This is another surface you can use the cruise boost on. So get your cruise boost, turn around, run up the platforms, and when you reach the gate, you can actually do 2 jumps and a spin to jump around the gate. There is an invisible wall here, so you will have to space some wide jumps to get around it. But once you do, turn around and jump into the spatula to collect it. When you do collect it, make sure your camera is facing away from the gate, so that way when he turns around to do the spatula animation, he doesn't fall off the cliff. After the spatula animation, you should end up right here against the gate. So now you can turn the camera and push off the ledge, then use a bubble bash as you're falling off the ledge, and pull to the left to steer yourself back to the main platform. Then time a double jump out of your bash, and you should be able to land on it. This method is of course the more difficult one, so for learning purposes, choose the one you're more comfortable with. There's always time to add more strats down the road once you've already completed some runs. So now that you've entered this gate, you'll appear in Jellyfish Lake, where you should fall off of the sledge and get a cruise boost off of this wall here. There are a couple of ways you can get on top of this fountain here. The easier method is jumping onto this grassy area and watching the tartar sauce cutscene, then jumping onto the fountain. The cutscene here is really short, so it doesn't lose much time compared to the other method I'm about to show you now. So for the more difficult method, you need to make sure you have a full speed cruise boost. So once you get it, go onto this sandy area here and run on the right side of it. When you reach the edge, do 2 full jumps and a bubble bounce. The bubble bounce will lift your collision box high enough to get on top of the fountain, which will cause you to bounce off of it, and then you can do a double jump to reach the island. Once you're across the gap, run up to the bus stop and switch to Patrick. Turn around and head back to this grassy platform in the center of the lake. Now you probably remember how to do this from your casual playthrough, but I'll just go over it again in case you haven't played this game casually. To complete this challenge, you have to slam when the hammer bots get near you, to stun them and then pick them up and throw them at the fountains. Once you've destroyed all the fountains by throwing robots at them, the cutscene will play and the goo will lower, revealing a golden spatula. So go collect it, then pause the game and select the Drain the Lake spatula in the menu. If you're on the GameCube or PS2 versions, the loading times are actually slow enough to make it faster to walk over to Mrs. Puff instead. But if you're going to take this route, make sure you talk to Mrs. Puff on the way back to the bus stop, because if you don't, you will soft lock the game by switching back to SpongeBob. It's just a bug that happens when you try to switch back as Mrs. Puff is talking to you. Either way you choose to get here, switch to SpongeBob and get a cruise boost off of this wall. Then use a bash to get on top of this rock, jump onto this platform, turn around, and we're going to do some platforming to get up to Spork Mountain. There will be 1 sock on the way up to the top, so make sure you collect that on your way. For For this jump, cut straight across the pond and make sure you stay close to the wall, because not jumping in this straight line might cause you to activate this text box, which will cause you to drown. If you do happen to drown, you can get another cruise boost off of this wall. And if you want to be safe about this jump, you can just run along this grassy area around the pond instead. Once you reach these wall jump walls, jump into this wall, do a wall jump, and push into the next wall. Keep doing this back and forth until you reach the top platform, and then use a bowl to get rid of your cruise boost. At this point, attack the Tartar robot closest to the cliff so he can't hit you off. Then collect the golden spatula on the cliff with your camera faced toward the other Tartar robot, so that way you don't get blindsided by his attacks and knocked off the cliff. Once the spatula is collected, run up to the end of the level over here, and enter this gate. King Jellyfish fight is easily exploited by using the cruise bubble. So once you get up to the arena, use the cruise bubble on him 3 times to win the fight. Then make your way over to the slide and accelerate yourself down with a bowling shot. Once you reach this point on the slide, do a side leap off and pull toward the slide after you jump. This allows you to bypass the winding passages to get this sock faster. And once it's collected, the rest of this level is self-explanatory. Collect the spatula at the end of the slide, pause the game, warp back to the first spatula in the level, talk to Squidward and collect the spatula from him. At this point, you should have a total of 46 spatulas and 13 socks. Now pause the game and warp to the first spatula in Goo Lagoon, which is the second area in the backtracking campaign. Once you load in, walk to around this position and use the cruise bubble. If you aim it off in this direction, a target will appear on the screen. This target is pointing out the button that's used to activate the Over the Moat challenge. So once you hit it, an island will rise up behind the castle with a golden spatula on it. At this point, get a cruise boost off of this wall, turn around and bash up on top of the castle like this. Now there are a couple of ways you can get to the top of the castle. The easier way is jumping onto the side of this barrel, and from there jumping to this tarp. It may not be obvious because the wooden plank blocks your vision, but the string of moves used to reach the tarp here is jump, double jump, spin. The more difficult yet faster way is turning to the right here and spacing 2 full jumps then a slam, which should get you on top of the tarp. Keep in mind that you need a full speed cruise boost to do the second option. Now when you're bouncing over the castle, collect the sock that's on top of the stack of tikis here. And for the spatula behind the castle, you have 2 separate options for collecting it. You can either bowl next to it and then walk into it, or you can jump out the sandcastle and slam into the spatula, which will cause you to bounce off the island and drown while you're collecting it. Doing this will delay your spatula animation until you respawn. But once you respawn, you can pause the game to interrupt the spatula animation and warp to the next level. Keep in mind that if you die at any point during this segment without collecting the spatula, you will have to hit the invisible button again to activate the challenge and try again. But anyway, once you've collected the spatula by either walking into it or drowning into it, pause the game, and remember if you drowned into the spatula, you can pause the game during the celebration to skip it. Now check to make sure you have 47 spatulas and 14 socks. Then scroll down to rock bottom and select the 3rd spatula in the menu. Return the museum's art. This will begin our 3rd section of backtracking. Entering rock bottom if you're on the Xbox version or if your memory card's still in, you'll have the save game glitch activated from skipping the spatula animation in the previous segment, if you chose to do so. Don't mind this though, because it'll just disappear when you collect the next spatula. So get a cruise boost off of this vending machine and follow my movement to make your way to Bubble Buddy. Talk to him, then bash on top of this rock, turn to the left, bash again, and space a bubble bounce so you can slam on top of the cliff. You do need a pretty fast cruise boost to get this, so if the one you got on the vending machine wasn't sufficient, you can get rid of it and try to get a faster one on this surface here. Once you're on top of the cliff, overshoot this trampoline, turn around and jump on it, and space a double jump, then a spin, and if you need it for extra distance, a bubble bounce, to get on top of this next platform and collect the spatula. If you're still on the cliff after collecting the spatula, you can double jump, spin, then slam back to the cliff you were just on, and climb onto these rocks here to collect the sock. If you end up below the cliff after the spatula animation, just use the previously taught bashing method to climb back up. This next part can be a bit tricky, so going into this, understand that shush tikis will only disappear if you're giving any analog input movement near them, so cruise boost movement does not count, and nor does jumping or bashing. So to get on top of these tikis, make sure you're lining SpongeBob straight into them when you approach them, and start to let SpongeBob drift into this little sand hump shown here. When SpongeBob drifts into the edge of the sand hump, tap the jump button, and when you land, do a bubble bash. And if your cruise boost is fast enough and you spaced it correctly, you should land on top of the stack of shush tikis. Now, to get to the museum, you have to remember that moving on top of these tikis will cause them to shrink. So you have to jump off them before moving. That way they start shrinking only after you jump off of them. And of course, there is the chuck here that you have to manipulate so that way you don't get hit. I believe the best way to do this is by pulling to the right after you jump, because he'll usually just be aiming his missile into the direction you are drifting. But once you're off the stack of tikis, you can double jump, spin, and slam if you need to get on top of the cliff. If you get hit by the chuck missile, there is a box on the ground you can walk up to and cruise boost on. If you don't get hit by the missile but you miss the cliff, you can activate the second box over on this cliff by walking up to this ledge, bashing into the box, and pulling back toward the ledge you just bashed from. Doing this will cause the box to open because you are in range of it, so then you can turn around and jump into this box on the ground, which will teleport you on top of the cliff. All you have to do at this point is collect the golden spatula. If you're still struggling to get the spatula as SpongeBob, here's an alternative to get it as Sandy. After collecting Swing Along Spatula as SpongeBob, pause the game and warp to Swing Along Spatula, and you'll load in as Sandy. Then just mimic this movement to get to the museum as Sandy, and don't forget to collect the sock on the way. Remember though that there is a chuck guarding the museum cliff, so you'll have to manipulate it while gliding over there so you don't get hit. After collecting the spatula as either SpongeBob or Sandy, pause the game and warp to the first spatula in the menu. When you load in, walk in this direction until you see the shush tikis under the thunder tiki start shrinking. Then use the cruise bubble and aim it in this direction to hit the button on the floor by Mr. Krabs. Doing this will activate the time challenge, which will cause a spatula to appear at the end of the level. Now keep in mind that if you die or have to reload at any point during this level, you will have to hit this button again to make the spatula appear. But as long as the timer is shown on the screen, you'll be able to get it. Now walk over to this rock and get a cruise boost off of it, and then follow this platforming movement to collect 2 socks and then the spatula at the end. Keep in mind you will need a fast cruise boost to get some of these jumps. When you reach the end here, use a spin attack on the ground, much like you did earlier in Jellyfish Fields, to delay your fall and give yourself more space to jump. Then you can do a double jump, spin, and a slam if you need to reach this platform and collect the golden spatula. Once that's done, pause the game and warp to the 6th spatula in the menu, across the trench of advanced darkness. Entering this level, avoid Gary's text box by walking to the right, and get a cruise boost off of this rock. You can then use bashes and jumps to climb up to this area up here, then run all the way up to the top and turn around. This jump spacing might be the hardest you've had to do yet, so I will show an alternative after this if you can't get it. After turning around, make sure you're facing toward the platform with the golden spatula on it. Then use a spin attack before running off to delay your fall. Run forward, and instead of jumping this time, use a bash when you run off the cliff. And as you're pushing forward toward the spatula platform, use a double jump, a spin, and a slam. If you time all of these properly, you'll land on top of the platform with the golden spatula where you can collect it. If you're having trouble with jumping over this way, try this method instead. Whether you collect the spatula as SpongeBob or Sandy, you have now finished learning Rock Bottom 2. Now that you've finished Rock Bottom 2, pause the game, scroll down to Mermalair, and scroll right to the 7th spatula in the menu, complete the rolling ballroom. This will begin the 4th backtracking segment, where you'll be taught to clip into the rolling ballroom case and skip the prawn fight with cruise boosting. BRC, or ballroom clip, is arguably the most important BfBB discovery of 2018. Today I'll show you 2 different ways of doing this trick. One method utilizes the L clipping tech while the other one uses the L bowling tech. I'll explain both of those in a bit. First, I'll explain the L clipping method for BRC. Start by bowling this button to drop the ball, then bowl this wheel to turn the track. Stand in this spot and wait for the ball to roll onto the track that you just turned. As soon as the ball reaches the track, fully charge a bubble ball while holding down the button until it automatically fires, and aim it at this area of the wheel. Now the ball should be turned off the track and rolling toward you. Push the ball into the corner between this glass case and the pillar. Now just jump on the ball and walk forward slowly until you land on the ground inside of the ball. For this next part, carefully walk to the right and attempt to drag the ball with you. Do this very slowly as you learn it to avoid popping out of the ball. If you do pop out of the ball, you can just roll it back to the corner where you started and try again. Once you and the ball have reached Mr. Krabs, face the glass case and perform a single cruise boost. Make sure that you walk toward the case, and while you're doing this, input the cruise bubble and bubble bowl at the same time, framed perfectly, to activate the cruise boost. If you're familiar with my cruise boost tutorial video, you don't have to do it twice. For this trick, you only have to do the inputs once. Now that your cruise boost is active, continue facing the case and move to the left and right to swing the ball. You're trying to build up the ball's momentum so when it clips away from you, you'll be forced inside the case. Once the ball starts swinging quickly, like so, stand next to Mr. Krabs during one of its swings to the right. The ball should then swing to the left, and as the ball looks like it's about to leave you, hold down the analog stick to walk toward the case and press the cruise bubble button as the ball leaves you. This should clip you into the glass case where you can collect the golden spatula. And you probably guessed by now that it's called L clipping because you press the L button to clip yourself in. Pretty simple, right? If you're having trouble with this method, you can use the elbow method instead. This method is 15 to 18 seconds faster than the one I just showed you, so if you find this one easier, you should definitely use it. Some people find it more difficult, however, so just use whichever one you feel comfortable with when you start doing runs. Some fundamental information on L bowling first. It's performed by using cruise boost inputs or pressing the bubble bowl and cruise bubble buttons on the same frame while not standing against flat ground. Doing so will cause SpongeBob to perform a bowl with one frame and no collision, meaning he can clip through the glass case on this frame if you're moving fast enough. So to set this up, just go to the corner and start walking down into the direction of this glass case. As you're walking down, line up the edge of the case with this pattern on the pillar over here. Now as you're walking down into the cage, and if you're lined up correctly, tap the jump button to perform a short jump, and you should be lodged between the case and the pillar like this. Now continue walking down into this area for a couple of seconds. Once you're deep into this area like this, quickly turn the control stick southwest and input cruise bubble and bubble bowl on the same frame. So what you're doing is flicking your control stick to force yourself out of this area, and as you're being forced out, use the L bowl tech to capture the speed at which you were forced out of the case. Because the bowling shot has forward momentum, and due to not having collision the instant you do it, it pushes you forward into the case, clipping you through. This method does sound easier on paper because it is less complex. However, it requires much faster and more precise inputs to perform. The first method I explained is a lot slower paced and more guaranteed, especially if you're new to speedrunning this game. In that case, 15 to 18 seconds won't make a difference at all when you first start. I'd say for now just use the one you're better at. Just be honest with yourself regarding how often you perform either of them successfully, and choose based on that. For those of you struggling with both the ballroom clip methods, I will offer you an alternative spatula to use instead of ballroom. This alternative spatula can also be used to sub in for any other spatula after Industrial Park. So if you're okay with ballroom and you struggle with any of the later spatulas, you can switch this in for one of those as well. So you'll have to set this up in the rock bottom segment. Before going to the museum, get rid of your cruise boost and switch to Sandy with this bus stop. Be sure to get rid of your cruise boost and then switch, and don't do them at the same time, because if you bowl too far from the bus stop while switching, you can potentially soft lock the game. So just make sure you bowl, then walk up to the bus stop and switch. So you can then walk up to the museum and collect the spatula as Sandy, and then turn around and enter the museum. This tutorial I'm about to play will show you how to clear the museum as Sandy. And again, I have to reiterate that this is not part of the base route. If you're fine with all the spatulas covered in this video and you don't want to replace anything, you can just skip this museum tutorial and continue learning Mermalair 2. To start, you're going to want to enter the museum as Sandy. After you reject the text box, you can climb up these objects to reach the turret and jump to the second level of the first area. After that, you can make your way up to the third level, where I highly recommend activating the checkpoint in case you fail this part during the run. Now stand on this railing and watch the center tire swing back and forth through the laser wall. When the center tire swings from your side and completely clips into the other side, double jump and glide toward the left side of it. If you time this well, you should be able to grab the tire and clip to the second area of the museum. This is because characters cannot experience knockback during grabbing animation. As long as you're grabbing for the time it takes for the tire to swing through the wall, you'll clip through. Make sure you pay attention to where your character is and do 2 controlled double jumps and a glide toward the tire to your left once you pop through. Control is important here because if you panic and fall, you'll get checkpointed on the bottom floor and be forced to reload to the swing along spatula level and enter the museum all over again. Now in this next part, there's an invisible checkpoint on the far left side of the third level. I highly recommend walking over there to activate it in case you fall. While walking across the third level, you should avoid touching the Thunder Tikis for as long as you can. as they can explode on you and also reduce the number of shiny objects you get from the shush tikis disappearing from you walking by. Now that you're waiting on this tire, you should watch the next tire swinging through the next laser wall over there. When the tire reaches this point in its movement away from the lasers, time 2 double jumps with a delayed glide as I do here, and start gliding to this area by the laser wall. Now glide in place here and turn to face the tire as it swings back into you. Don't push into the tire or you might land on top of it. Just glide in place and let the tire fall into your grasp. If you do happen to go too high and the tire goes under you, you can just jump off of it and glide in place again as a backup. If you space this properly, the tire should swing into Sandy's grasp, causing her to grab the ledge and swing through the second laser wall. Once you clip through, all you have to do is jump down and collect the golden spatula. And once again, going inside the Rock Bottom Museum to get the spatula is only used as a replacement for any other spatula you wanted to get rid of. So if you're not replacing any spatulas in the run, just disregard the museum. Now let's get back to Mermalair 2. Now that you've collected the rolling ballroom spatula, pause the game and scroll to the 8th spatula in the menu, Defeat Prawn. To skip the prawn fight, there is an invisible out-of-bounds debug trigger, in which you can activate by simply touching it. To reach that out-of-bounds trigger, get a cruise boost off of this wall, and climb up to this crevice inside of the wall. This area might be pretty hard to see, so what you can do is turn up your brightness and turn the camera so you can see all the geometry outside of the map. Now to clip out of this area, first off you have to make sure your cruise boost is fast. And second, you just have to face this direction and mash the cruise bubble button. This is a technique called L-clipping, which abuses the collision detection properties of the cruise bubble to allow SpongeBob to clip through tight spaces. So while you're L-clipping through this wall, you have to anticipate yourself clipping through, otherwise you'll just fall off. By anticipating yourself clipping through, you can react to yourself popping out and pull to the left to make sure you stay on the outer bounds of the map. Then you can turn around and jump back to safety. If you run back in this direction, you'll notice that you get walled off, and that's because the outer walls of this area don't have textures on them. I mean, why would they if you can't see them from the inside of the map? So just be careful navigating here because most of the platforms and geometry are invisible, and you can't get stuck or fall. Try climbing up to this top area over here and notice the jagged geometry that I've highlighted. Now, if you recall, I mentioned before there is an out-of-bounds trigger that we have to touch to end this fight, but since it's invisible, we need to have visual cues to point out where it is. And this geometry here is actually going to do just that. We can use this little triangle as a pointer to show us where the trigger is. So if you line SpongeBob up in the direction of this pointer, and while running forward off the pointer, jump once and spin, you should touch the invisible trigger and the fight will end instantly. If you're on the GameCube version, you will not get teleport back to the inside of the map. So if this applies to you, pause the game and warp to the 8th spatula in the menu. If not, then touching the trigger will put you back inside the map, where you can collect the golden spatula and finish Mermalair 2. One of the most common errors I see here is just hesitating, pulling back, or not jumping in a straight line when going for the trigger. You shouldn't be afraid of missing it. You will have to miss it sometimes to learn where it is. And as you become more confident in where to jump, you'll become more consistent at it as well. And if you're really having a lot of trouble doing prawn skip, you can use this method for fighting prawn instead. Enter the arena and walk down this exact column of tiles. You'll know you're on the right path if you see this highlighted metal plate below it. And when you eventually hit this invisible barrier, keep walking forward on this same column of tiles. You're going to keep walking forward throughout the entire duration of the fight. And when prawn stops using his attack, use a bubble bowl to hit him. Do this 3 times and you win. But keep in mind, if you're doing this method, you'll likely have to collect the golden underwear on top of the police station, which was shown at the beginning of the run. Doing this strategy with 5 pairs of underwear makes it a lot more lenient. This alternative to prawn skip is only around half a minute slower, but it's perfectly fine to use as a beginner if you're struggling with the trigger method. Now that you've finished Mermalair 2, you can pause the game and scroll down to Sand Mountain. Select the first spatula in the menu, and once again this level is pretty short, so I'm not going to add a title card for it. But all you have to do is walk up to this wall, get a cruise boost, and for this one you have to really make sure you have a fast speed for it, otherwise this next trick probably won't work for you. So walk up to this railing and have SpongeBob just slide against it like this. So that way he's looking straight down this part of the rail. Now jump onto the rail and let him drift into the direction of this top platform with the golden spatula on it. And when you drift around to this part of the rail, press the bash button and he should bash on top of the platform where you can collect the spatula. This is a pretty tight jump, so it might take you some time to get down, but if you're really struggling with it and can't get it, you can always just go over to the bus stop, switch to Sandy, and do this instead. Either way you choose to get the spatula is fine, but just remember that after you're done, you have to go under this platform by the bus stop and collect the sock. Now, after all 5 of these backtracking segments, you should have 54 spatulas and 18 socks. If you don't have these exact numbers, go back in the video and try to figure out where you missed them. But if you have 54 and 18, scroll back up to Bikini Bottom and select the first spatula in the menu, on top of the pineapple. Then you can walk over to the taxi pad for downtown and enter it. From this point on, we just have downtown, Kelp Forest, Graveyard, and 1 spatula and dream before entering the Chum Bucket Lab. So hang in there, you're getting closer to the end. Entering downtown, there are 2 places you can get your cruise boost. For this first one, make sure you kill this jellyfish first, so that way it can't interrupt you. But there's also some other information you have to know about this particular cruise boost. This is what we call a manual cruise boost. A manual cruise boost is a cruise boost for which you have to manually detonate the cruise bubbles against the wall, because the wall doesn't go high enough to detonate the cruise bubble automatically. All you have to do for this is manually press the L button to cancel the cruise bubble that comes out from doing the bubble bowl and cruise bubble in the same frame. Do this after both cruise boost inputs. And here's an example with some on-screen input graphics. If you're struggling with this one, the alternative is over here by this building. So get a cruise boost off of this wall, or on the manual spot that I showed you earlier, and then run over to this area with the statue. Make sure that you're facing the statue when you run over to it, so that way when the cutscene begins, you drift into the statue and get stuck on it. Otherwise, you'll drift too far into the distance. So when you regain control, make a left and jump on top of this rock, then to the lamp, and then on top of the Thunder Tiki. From this Thunder Tiki, double jump to the next one, and then jump to the next one, and then the next one after that. By jumping on these Thunder Tikis, you're causing them to detonate the stone tikis under them, which will reveal some buttons you have to slam on. So now go around in the same direction and start slamming on these buttons. For this final button, make sure that SpongeBob is facing away from the red dotted lines before you slam on it, because if you're facing the out of bounds area, the cutscene will start and you won't be able to move during it, which will cause the hand to grab you and then reactivate the out of bounds triggers, in which case you have to go back to Bikini Bottom and re-disable the hand. So because you don't want to do this, make sure you're facing the inner part of the map before you hit the button, so that way you don't die while the cutscene's playing. Once you regain control, you can jump on top of the statue with cruise boosting like this to get the spatula. If you fall off the tiki stacks while platforming across them, here are some backups you can use to finish the segment. If you're having too much trouble doing this platforming with the cruise boost, you can get rid of it with a bowling shot and jump up normally like this. After collecting the spatula, you can jump down and get a cruise boost off of this side of the statue like this. But regardless of how you got the spatula and whether you preserve your cruise boost, jump onto this rock over here and double jump toward the lamp in the distance. Now you're going to use a bubble bounce on top of the lamp to bounce off of it. However, you're going to have to boost your bubble bounce to get over the gate. To boost your bubble bounce, hold down the A button while you're doing a bubble bounce. So as you bounce off the lamp while holding the A button, SpongeBob will get some increased jump height that'll get you over the gate. Now for the next lamp, use a bubble bash to land on top of it and then double jump over to this fallen building. From here you can run over to the edge of this building and turn left. Then jump on top of the floating tikis and then jump from there to this platform with the sock on it. If you happen to fall while doing this, you can recover by making your way back to the lamp, bashing on top of it, jumping back to the building. then jumping from this chimney to the bank. Once you're on top of the bank, turn around and bash on top of this banner or the poles supporting it. And then you can jump from there to the platform with the sock on it. Remember that you have the bubble bounce to extend your distance if needed. Now after collecting the sock, jump on this fallen building and jump onto the base of the cannon. Don't jump onto the tip of the cannon because you might get hit by the object it's firing. But from the base of the cannon, double jump, spin, and then use a bubble bounce to extend your jumps to the platform with the golden spatula. And then try to hold back on the control stick and bowl in place, so that way you can get rid of your cruise boost while standing on the platform, and then collect the spatula. If you happen to fall here, an easy way to recover this is by bashing onto this door, then bashing onto the pipe supporting the platform, and then jumping all the way back to the fallen building with the cannon. From here you can try again. If you destroy the cannon by accident, you'll have to bash onto the door and then to the pipe, and then turn yourself slightly to face the wall, so that way you're facing against the building while still standing on top of this pipe. Then use a bowling shot to get rid of your cruise boost while standing on the pipe. From here you can jump off the pipe and onto the platform like this. If you're still struggling with this jump as SpongeBob, here are some movement alternatives with Sandy. Once you've collected the spatula, enter the rooftops over here, and make your way over to this button that's on the ground. If you're still Sandy, you'll have to go to this bus stop to switch to SpongeBob, but if you're already SpongeBob, bounce on the button to activate this trampoline. To skip the Swingin' Sandy challenge, you'll have to do a series of jumps and spins to bypass the invisible wall guarding the spatula. If you bounce too high on the trampoline, the invisible wall guarding the spatula platform will push you away. So you have to go low enough on the trampoline to not touch the invisible wall, while still being high enough to make it to the platform. To do this, watch this segment at normal speed to get a feel for the jump timing. The order of actions here is jump on the trampoline, hold toward the spatula platform, double jump, spin, double jump again. Once you've collected the spatula, pause the game and make sure you have 57 spatulas and 19 socks. Then scroll up to Bikini Bottom and select the third spatula in the menu, on top of the Chum Bucket. For getting on top of the Chum Bucket, I'll first show you the harder method and then I'll show you the easier method. When you load into Bikini Bottom, walk up to the Chum Bucket doors and cruise boost. After cruise boosting, turn left and face the robot headquarters sign, then bash onto the nail sticking out of it. From the top of the sign, you can jump to the bottom button that's sticking out of the Chum Bucket, and then turn your control stick inward to the Chum Bucket to get stuck on the wall. Now because cruise boosting is always pushing you forward, you can then pull left and jump, then pull back to the right and double jump to land on top of the next button. Repeat this for the next button and then use a bash to get on top of the Chum Bucket and collect the spatula that's sitting there. For the easier method, use the cruise bubble to hit these 3 buttons, and a trampoline will spawn on the ground. So just jump on that and it'll send you to the top. Simple enough. After the spatula is collected, if you still have a cruise boost from the harder method, bowl off the rim of the Chum Bucket to get rid of it, while pushing yourself to the Kelp Forest taxi pad. Now the spatula lock will disappear, so you can jump on the taxi pad and enter the Kelp Forest. Immediately entering Kelp Forest, the first trick we have to do is Kelp Forest backward. So get a cruise boost off of this box, jump onto this leaf, which will bounce you on top of this platform where you can turn around, run onto the leaf above it, and bounce yourself to this platform in front of you. From there you can enter the kelp vines from its exit, effectively skipping the entire Kelp Forest and placing you at the end of the vine slide. So from here you can collect the golden spatula and jump in the box to accept the time challenge from Mermaid Man. When you see the timer pop into the right corner of the screen, walk over to the start of the vine slide and stand under the vine like this. Now if you push to the left from here and stay under the vine, you can space a full jump to the left, which will activate the timer from under the slide. Then turn around and extend your full double jump back to the platform. So now you should have the timer activated without being on the slide. Now turn around and walk back to the box where you came from, and when you teleport to the bottom of the slide, walk over to the edge of this cliff, which should trigger the end of the Mermaid Man time challenge, as indicated by the yellow text on the screen. Then jump back in the box and Mermaid Man will spawn a spatula. Collect it, then enter the kelp caves from this exit area. Upon entering kelp caves, you'll spawn right next to a golden spatula, so walk into it, and then once you collect it, pause the game, and scroll to the 5th spatula in the menu through the kelp caves. Select it and you'll load into the beginning of the kelp caves, where you can turn around again and walk out the entrance of the kelp caves. This will place you at the end of the kelp swamps. Now walk down the bridge and go to this area with the rocks on the ground with a golden spatula next to it. Face in this direction and use the cruise bubble. Then aim it to this area down in the swamp with a button on the ground. Hit the button with the cruise bubble and it'll activate a cutscene that shows the cage opening with the spatula inside of it. Now all you have to do from here is grab this spatula next to you, then walk over here, jump down, and grab the spatula inside the cage. Once that's finished, pause the game and scroll to the 3rd spatula in the menu, Tiki Roundup, and select it. When you load in as Patrick, turn around and walk in this direction, which will backtrack you to the end of the kelp woods, and when you enter that level, collect the golden spatula in front of you. And with that, you've finished learning how to speedrun the Kelp Forest. At this point, if you pause the game, you should have 64 spatulas and 19 socks. Scroll down to Mr. Krabs at the bottom of the menu and select the first spatula. After loading into Bikini Bottom, get a cruise boost off of this surface and run behind the Krusty Krab. On the way to the graveyard taxi pad, hit this dumpster with a bubble spin, and it will spawn the final sock that you collect in the run. Continue running toward the Dutchman's graveyard taxi pad, and use a bowling shot and push forward when you reach this rock on the ground here. This will push you onto the graveyard taxi pad so you can skip the cutscene. But keep in mind that if you miss your bowling shot, do not accept the taxi prompt. Otherwise, you'll soft lock the game because you drift past the taxi pad with a cruise boost while the taxi's trying to pick you up. So if this happens to you, instead just let yourself drift past the taxi pad, jump off of the out of bounds sand as quickly as possible, get rid of your cruise boost, and enter the graveyard. Because remember, if you re-enable the hand by accident, you have to disable it again before going into this level. If all of this sounds too risky to you, you can instead get rid of your cruise boost before going onto the taxi pad. And with that, we will enter the Dutchman's Graveyard, the most challenging platforming section in the run. But despite this, it's still a lot of fun to play as well. So stay motivated, you're almost there. Entering the Dutchman's Graveyard, walk down this path and make a right to reach this staircase and get a cruise boost off of it. After getting the cruise boost, jump to these swaying platforms and notice the Chuck floating in the background. You'll have to manipulate him to throw his missile away from you, so that way it doesn't hit you and end your cruise boost. If the Chuck hits you, you can retaliate with a bash to destroy it, and then get a cruise boost off of this tombstone. Once you've dealt with the Chuck, jump to this rock pillar on the side of the cliff. Then jump around the next rock pillar and to the one that's over here. And to make this distance, you'll have to bubble bounce on top of it and bounce to this area behind the rock where you'll get stuck. If you fall on the lower level of this pillar, you can use a bubble bash to get on top of it. Once you're behind this rock, face forward and use a spin, which will neutralize your downward momentum, which allows you to use the cruise bubble, which will then be used to hit the goo tanker lid. Now a cutscene will play that demonstrates the goo lowering, revealing a golden spatula inside of this cage, but we won't be getting that until later in the segment. So for now, run in this direction, and again manipulate this chuck so you don't get hit by it. Then jump from this ship to the lower ship, where you'll find a golden spatula. Make sure you turn your camera in this direction before collecting it, otherwise you'll get pushed into the goo during the spatula animation, which will cause you to drown. In case this happens, I'll show you an alternative to do this next part if you're returning from the beginning of the level after drowning. But if you didn't drown while collecting the spatula, jump up to this upper level of the ship and face SpongeBob in this corner. Now you can turn the camera down if you want a better visual on it, but all you have to do from here is push forward and mash the cruise bubble button, which will cause you to L-clip through the rails and land on the trampoline, and the bounce will send you out of bounds on top of this cliff. Here's another reminder that if you go out of bounds while the hand is enabled, you will get grabbed. So make sure that if you enable the hand by accident at any point during this learning process, you go back to Bikini Bottom and disable it before learning the rest of this level. As I mentioned before, here's an alternative way of getting out of bounds if you happen to drown while collecting the spatula. Now that you're out of bounds, run in this direction until you reach the edge of this cliff. Before you jump, you have to zoom in your camera to do this next strat. Now jump to this cliff with the golden spatula on it with the camera zoomed in. With the camera facing this way, collect the spatula by grabbing it from the left side, and SpongeBob should collect the spatula while spinning around on the platform. Obviously failing this will cause you to fall off and drown, but I've already explained how to get back here from drowning anyway. So once the spatula is collected, run to this area and enter the graveyard of ships. Shipwreck bungee skip is very similar to cow bungee skip. All you have to do is run out of bounds over here and jump over this golden spatula and land on it to collect it. If you miss the spatula on the way down, don't worry. You can just stand under it and bash into it as a backup. Now pause the game and select the 5th spatula in the menu, Shipwreck Bungee. Now I'll show you 2 options to cross this gap. The first option is a manual cruise boost off of this surface. If you don't remember how to manual cruise boost, go back to the downtown Bikini Bottom segment and rewatch the beginning of it. With the manual cruise boost, you can jump to the edge of this ship and then jump to the platform. But beware the clam text box that'll appear if you run too far to the left on this ship. And this just goes as a general reminder for the rest of the shipwreck segment. You can always pause the game and warp to the 5th spatula in the menu if you happen to fall at any point in this level. If you're struggling with the manual cruise boost, you can try the wall jump method. Just remember that after each wall jump, you have to push forward and into the direction of the next mast. Then when you reach the mast, push into the direction of the wall and jump again. I may be over explaining this, but some people genuinely struggle with these wall jumps. Now for this next section, I'll once again show you 2 methods. This first method is called wall jump skip. Get a cruise boost off of this surface and run into the direction of this sub window. There will be a Chuck here when you do this, but you shouldn't worry about him because his missile is not capable of hitting you if you do this quickly enough. So double jump and push into the direction of the sub window and try to land between the window and the wall while mashing the bash button. And this should give you a bash that boosts you on top of the window. Now from here you can space 2 full jumps to this wooden beam and land on it, where you can do a short jump, bash off the wooden beam behind it, press the bash button, pull to the left and slam to land on top of these metal sheets. Now this sounds like a lot to take in at once, so here's a full segment so you can see it in full speed. If you're struggling with wall jump skip, the alternative is doing the normal wall jumps. So instead of getting a cruise boost, go inside the ship and jump from this platform to the platform with the spinning planks. Now stand right about here facing this direction while the planks turn. When a plank finally stops in front of you, jump into it and do a wall jump off of it without giving any analog input. This is easily the most common mistake made here during casual play and speedrun play. If you use the analog stick to move during these wall jumps, you will not line up properly with the next plank and fall off. So make sure that after this first plank wall jump, the only input you're doing to reach the top of this section is pressing A when you touch the wall. And remember, if you realize you're ahead of the plank cycle, you can always delay your next jump slightly, so that way you catch the next plank on time. So now after the wall jumps, you can either jump to this wooden beam and climb the sheets, or you can turn around in the opposite direction and perform a full jump, a spin, and a full double jump to grab the sledge, which will place you on the platform with the golden spatula. And remember, if you got here with the cruise boosting method, just remember to bowl to get rid of your cruise boost before collecting the golden spatula. Now jump to and use this floating ship to enter the next segment. The first thing you'll do here is go talk to Mr. Krabs and get a cruise boost off of this surface. Be careful when jumping to this platform and then to the ship because this Chuck will notice you as you do it. To manipulate his missile shot, you can jump against this barrel and then run around the right side once he throws it. If you fall here, you can pause the game and warp to the 6th or 7th spatula in the menu, which will place you back where you spawned in the level. So after manipulating the Chuck, run to this first button and hit it with a bubble spin. Then turn around, run to the edge of the ship, jump on it, and use a bash to push yourself onto this floating platform. Now continue climbing these floating platforms until you reach the top, and hit this next button with a bubble spin. Then fall down and hit the next button after that over here. Then finally jump to this area on the ship with the chest on it, and do a short hop, then time a bubble bounce to slam on the 4th button, activating the final cannon. Then a cutscene will play, revealing a golden spatula. Grab the spatula with the camera facing in this direction, so you get pushed toward the chest while you're collecting it. Then you can turn the camera and use a bowling shot to get rid of it, jump up and slam on the button inside of the chest. The reason why you have to get rid of your cruise boost here is because sometimes during the cutscene, the force of the cruise boost will push you inside of the chest and clip you into it. And the reason why we have to watch this cutscene is due to a developer oversight, which unlocks the Flying Dutchman fight in the pause menu after hitting this button, despite not having destroyed the robot cannons. So when the cutscene finishes, you won't be teleported to the Dutchman fight, but you can from this point turn around, jump on this trampoline, and land on this platform to collect the golden spatula. Then, after collecting it, pause the game and scroll to the final spatula in the menu, and select Defeat the Flying Dutchman. This trick may give you more trouble than any of the other cruise boost tricks so far, so just be patient with it and know that you'll get it eventually. I'll try to explain it as best as I can. So first off, go to the bus stop and switch to SpongeBob. Then walk over to this surface with the wooden plank laying on it, and get a cruise boost off of it. After cruise boosting, jump over this wall and run to the right until you reach this area. Keep in mind for this first climbing segment, you want to make sure that SpongeBob is facing the same direction the entire time. Now remember, because cruise boosting is constantly pushing you forward and makes your turning slower, this does not mean you should be pushing forward the entire time. In fact, we'll mostly be pushing side to side while SpongeBob himself faces forward. So when you reach this area where you see the open part of the ship, bash and land on top of it. Then, all while SpongeBob is facing forward, pull to the right on the control stick until SpongeBob appears to be off the ledge like this. Remember from all previous jump spacing sections in this tutorial that you can run off a ledge and still input moves for a quarter of a second before falling. So don't be afraid of falling off the ledge when you do this. You have to run off pretty far to get it. So again, while SpongeBob is facing forward, pull to the right until you're off the ledge. Then use a bash when you're off the ledge, and pull to the left while the bash comes out. Then finally, use a bubble bounce and continue pulling to the left to land on the upper level of the ship. This is likely the hardest part of the trick, so get some practice in for this part before moving on. And here's a full speed segment of what we've done so far. Okay, so now that you're on top of the ship, run to the right side and jump onto this wall. And then from the wall, jump onto this triangular cutout over here. Now turn the camera to face this triangular wood chip in front of you. And once it looks like this, jump behind it to get stuck on it like so. All you have to do is face the indented area of this beam in the distance. Make sure you're stuck behind the triangular wood chip. Then, as lightly as possible, tap the jump button and mash the bash button as quickly as possible after, which should cause you to land on top of the wood chip and get a bash. And if your cruise boost speed is fast enough, you'll get pushed toward the beam, where you can then input a bubble bounce and pull toward the indent so you land inside of it, from where you are now on top of the next level of the ship. Now do some platforming to reach this area over here, and have SpongeBob drifting into this wall like this. Now turn your camera to cover around half of this smokestack of this boat on the ground in the distance. This part will be very similar to Prawn Skip, where you do a full jump and a spin to reach a trigger in the distance. Because much like Prawn Skip, this fight also uses a debug trigger exploit to skip the Dutchman. So to touch the invisible trigger, all you have to do is pull to the left, jump, and spin, moving forward in a direction just slightly left of the smokestack you were looking at, just like this. And once you touch it, you'll trigger the victory cutscene and appear next to the spatula, unless you're on the PS2 version. Much like Prawn Skip on GameCube, skipping the Flying Dutchman does not place you next to the spatula on PS2. So if you happen to be on that console, here's some out of bounds platforming you can do to reach that area.
Had enough?
Once you've collected the spatula for defeating the Flying Dutchman, pause the game and scroll to the third spatula in the menu, Goo Tanker Ahoy. Now turn around and run along the left side of this cliff, and when you reach the edge, fall off and spin to land on this next platform. Talk to and purchase this clam, which will open a chest revealing a button inside of it. Now turn around, walk over to this surface and get a cruise boost off of it. Then walk up to this chest and position yourself in front of it, and when you're ready, hold down the jump button and use a bubble bounce to glide over the chest and hit the button. Now all you have to do is mimic this platforming segment to finish this time challenge and collect the golden spatula inside of the cage. Once you've collected the golden spatula, you've finished the Dutchman's graveyard, and you should have 72 spatulas and 20 socks. Don't mind this pause menu count because in my recording session, I accidentally did the spatulas out of order. So just know that here you need to have 72 spatulas and 20 socks. So once you've checked to make sure you have 72 and 20, scroll down to SpongeBob's Dream and select the 5th spatula in the menu. Music is in the ear of the beholder. This is, in my opinion, the single toughest spatula in the entire run for beginners to learn. So be patient with it because it's a lot of trial and error. The first thing you must know about Squidward's Dream is that the moving notes run on a cycle, so therefore losing time missing the first cruise boost will make the rest of this section a lot more difficult. I would recommend pausing the game and reloading the level if you miss too many of them, so that way you can reset the cycle. So after getting a fast cruise boost, jump across these notes until you reach this bar, and make sure that when you land on the bar you're decently far to the right, so that way you have a lot of space to turn to the left. And once you jump to this orange note and continue turning left, we are going to attempt trumpet jump. Now I'm no musician, so please excuse my terminology, but what you're aiming to jump for here is this open area at the bottom, and where you want to push forward and aim specifically is the bottom right area of this lower section, highlighted here. Double jumping from the orange note and pushing into this area should give you a bounce, which you should anticipate, just so you can react faster once you get it. So once you do get the bounce, pull slightly back and to the left, and then push forward to pursue the floating tambourine. The tambourine will be in a different spot depending on how long it took you to get here, so keep that in mind when thinking about how many cruise boosts you missed before going to this area. The amount of time it took you to get your cruise boost will be the determining factor in where this tambourine ends up, and keep in mind that trumpet jump is probably the most difficult part of this segment, so don't feel discouraged if it takes you a while to get it down. Okay, so now that you've skipped the first level of Squidward's Dream, I have to remind you of some fundamental information that a lot of people seem to forget in this level. So you know how bubble spinning can stall your momentum in air, and that you can only stall yourself once before touching the ground again? Well, this also applies to trampolines as well. If you expend your bubble stall before landing on a trampoline, trying to bubble stall after bouncing off the trampoline will not give you the momentum stall. The only objects here that'll refresh your bubble stall are notes and bars, so be careful not to use your bubble stall twice before landing on either of those things. Otherwise, you'll just get sent straight down. So moving forward with that information in mind, bounce from the tambourine to the next orange note, then jump to this next orange note, to this drum, and then to the tambourine. Now be especially careful from here on out after jumping off the orange note, because you won't have another note to refresh your bubble spin on until the next part of the track. So keeping that in mind, try to conserve your bubble spin and don't waste it. So again, orange note to the drum, to the tambourine, and then to the next drum. Now from this drum you'll notice a tambourine moving back and forth in front of you. The position of this tambourine is mostly, again, influenced by how quickly you got your cruise boost and how good your movement was. So if you got your cruise boost quickly and had fast movement up until this point, it should be around here, where you can jump on it and possibly space a double jump and maybe a spin or a slam if you need them to land on this orange note and therefore skip the next part of the track. If you see the tambourine headed in the wrong direction and you know you're not going to make the cycle, you can bounce from the drum to this bar on the right and try to move around in place on it while you wait for the tambourine to go back into its normal spot. Then jump from the bar to the tambourine and space a double jump, then a slam to land on the orange note, then push toward the next drum during your bounce off the orange note. and from there, jump to the note that's farthest away from the drum. In this particular example, it's the note that's all the way to the left. The reason why you're jumping to the note that's the farthest from the drum is because that note should also be the closest to the next note, which is next to the clarinet that you're aiming to reach. And by the way, do not jump to the saxophone here, or jump to any saxophone throughout this entire segment for that matter. The reason being is that saxophones are scripted trampolines, and because you have a cruise boost active, jumping on a scripted trampoline will overwrite its momentum and just push you in the direction of your cruise boost with the speed of that cruise boost. So in short, it'll just throw you into the abyss and you have no control over it. This is also the reason why that trampoline jump in the graveyard lake works as well. But in that particular case, the trampoline script is actually useful. So again, jump from the blue note here to the next blue note. Do not jump on the saxophone between them. Then from the next blue note, jump on top of the clarinet, run up to this area on the clarinet just before the nose, and use a bubble bash to land on top of the nose. Then do a short jump up to the spatula to collect it. And you've now successfully learned the most difficult spatula thus far in the tutorial. I say thus far because there is one more difficult strat I'll teach you, but it's certainly optional. Heavy emphasis on optional. But for now, you should feel accomplished that you've learned this. Let's watch a full segment. Now that you've finished Squidward's dream, you should have 73 spatulas and 20 socks. Again, much like the graveyard, I made a mistake in the video where I had the wrong number of spatulas and socks. So just know that if you did this all correctly, you should have 73 spatulas and 20 socks. So now once the game is paused, scroll down to Patrick and select the first spatula in the menu. When you load in, talk to Patrick twice and trade in 20 socks for 2 spatulas, setting you at 75 total spatulas, which is, as you probably know, the number required to unlock the Chum Bucket Lab. So once you have 75 spatulas and 0 socks, pause the game and scroll all the way to the right to the final spatula in the menu, a wall jump in the Chum Bucket. Walking forward to the Chum Bucket doors, when you reach this point on the ground, use a bowling shot to push yourself into the cutscene while it plays. This will push you forward while you have no control over SpongeBob, saving you a little bit of time. And once you regain control, cancel the text and continue walking forward, then bowl into the doors before the next cutscene plays. And you should save a little bit of time there too. Now once you regain control, you can enter the Chum Bucket Lab, which is the final section of this tutorial route.
Better change tactics and fast. Oh, the humanity.
Today I'll show you how to skip both parts of the final fight in SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. This is done by activating an invisible trigger on top of the spawn platform in phase 1 to skip it, then boosting down to the lower level in the second phase to skip right to the brain and finish off the fuses inside of it. To start off, when you load the level and use the cruise bubble instantly, you'll benefit from invincibility frames. This means that for your first cruise bubble, if you're quick enough, you'll be invulnerable, so you can use this to hit one of the lights on Robo SpongeBob straight out of the gate. Now if you quickly activate another cruise bubble immediately after the first hit, you can hit him a second time and summon Roboplankton. Now you probably haven't been paying much attention to his placement up until this point, but Roboplankton can appear on either side of the starting platform at any distance from you. So pay attention after the second hit to see where he comes from, and aim the cruise bubble in the general direction in which you think he's headed. Keep in mind that sometimes he may stop to juke you out, which you should be prepared for as well. Occasionally the cruise bubble can clip through the hitbox of Roboplankton, so I recommend manually detonating the cruise bubble once you're in range of him. Just hit the cruise bubble button or trigger once you touch him to assure the hit lands. Now at this point the Big Bob should be waking up from his nap. Before he wakes up you should position yourself in the left side of the platform, facing the right side in preparation to run. You must stand on the left side before the robot attacks you. Otherwise, he'll hit the opposite side of the platform and mess up your setup to skip the fight. As RoboBob approaches, walk to the right side of the platform and stand on the edge. For this part, I can give you advice, but it ultimately comes down to getting a feel for it. It's hard to articulate the exact movement because it's very feel-based, but I'll try my best. Just focus on the visual and sound cues when you're trying to practice on your own, and you'll eventually get a feel for it. The visual cue is the karate glove colliding with the platform. The sound cue is the thumping sound from when RoboSponge hits the platform. Now when you're on the right side of the platform anticipating the attack, walk to the right and full jump at the same time when the glove hits the platform, which is also indicated by the thumping sound I played earlier. If you focus on these two cues in the basic movement of walking and doing a full jump, you'll eventually start to get a feel for it. And by full jump, I mean holding down the jump button to maximize your jump height. Don't tap the button, hold it down. Now if you do this successfully and travel straight up, you should hit the trigger to skip the first phase. If you miss the trigger, you should try double jumping at the peak of your height, and sometimes you'll barely touch it if you were slightly off. If that doesn't work, follow the ground and reset the attack cycle. Then jump on the trampoline here and land on the platform to the right of it. Now this is not the platform with the trigger over it, so what you're going to do is set up the trick exactly the way I explained before. Then, instead of letting yourself fly straight up, pull to the right and use your double jump if you have to touch the trigger above the platform to your right. If you're having trouble boosting into the air, there are a couple of things you can do to judge whether you were too early or too late on your jump. If you hop over the platform and get no height, you were too early. If you spin around the platform or take damage from the karate chop, or both, you were too late. Calibrate your jump knowing these two things and you should be able to get the timing down. Now once you hit the trigger, pay attention to your controller vibration as the cutscene starts. Despite being in an active cutscene, the world around you is still moving in real time while it's going on. So if you skip the cutscene before SpongeBob lands on the ground from that big jump he just did, the spatula collection animation will be forced to activate after you enter the next level, which isn't desirable because it's very slow and it's easy to skip if you just wait for yourself to fall. When SpongeBob lands, your controller will vibrate. Skip the cutscene after the controller vibrates, as this means you've landed and the spatula animation has started. Therefore, the spatula animation won't start when the next level loads. Controller vibration is a great way for getting a feel to when to skip the cutscene. I don't personally use vibration, but I recommend it to anybody starting as it can be very helpful. And let me interject here to say that if you double jump into the trigger, you'll have to wait a little bit longer to press A after you feel the vibration, because landing out of a double jump gives SpongeBob a crouching animation that delays the spatula celebration. So if you double jumped into the trigger, just wait around a second and a half to skip the cutscene after you feel the vibration. And now it's time for the second phase. This part is very simple. Just bowl the Duplicatotron after jumping on this trampoline, stand to the left of it on this edge of the platform like so. So the Hammerbot may spawn and try to hit you before the thing blows up, but if it doesn't, the duplicator will still explode and send you down, so it covers both possibilities. You should have the hand disabled at this point, by the way. If you get caught by the hand here, it probably means you missed that part of the video. I recommend going back and rewatching it if this happened to you. But if you already disabled the hand, great. You should be sent downward into the fuse by the electric gate. Just hit that thing and jump onto the trampoline that spawns to enter the final segment of the fight. You'll notice that Roboplankton won't appear in this part, and that's because he's still waiting for you to defeat the robots on the first platform. So all you have to do is use the cruise bubble on all 3 fuses and you win. And with that, you've finished learning the SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Any % speedrun route.
Are you sure about that?
That's right, we still have one more optional trick to learn if you're feeling up to it. If Squidward's dream wasn't challenging enough, this one will definitely leave you satisfied. Neurosurgery requires the fastest possible cruise boost you can get off of this wall. So if you still feel like your average cruise boost speed is inadequate, maybe just hold off on learning this strat until later. In most segments, you're not going to save more than around 10 seconds from doing this, so it'll hurt you more than help you to implement it into runs too early. With that said, once you get a fast cruise boost off of this surface, turn around, face the trampoline, and let SpongeBob drift into the distance at around this angle. For this next section, you'll have to pay close attention to when I jump, double jump, and slam. The timings for these are absolutely crucial. When SpongeBob drifts to around this line on the platform, begin this string of jump, double jump, slam with this timing. If you space this perfectly to land on the absolute edge of the trampoline with a bubble bounce, the trampoline should bounce you on top of the screen attached to the brain. From here, you can run in this direction and get yourself stuck in the left corner of the screen. And now you'll notice this blue pipe attached to the brain in the far distance. So now from this corner, you want to space a full jump, a full double jump, a spin, and a bubble bounce to land yourself on this pipe and get yourself stuck between the pipe and the brain. This jump is a bit different than the other ones we've covered though, because you're going to have to adjust your angle during your bubble bounce. After your double jump spin, use the bubble bounce and pull to the right, and try angling yourself into this direction, which will force you in between the pipe and the brain, slightly clipping you in. But you're not clipped in yet. Once you've landed on the pipe, you may be in various different spots. But regardless of where you land, you have to run into this little crevice here and turn the camera much like you did for prawn skip, so that way you can see the inside of the brain after mashing L for a little bit to L clip in. So once you L clip a little bit more, you should take notice that the brain itself is pulsating, as in the metal sheets that you've just clipped into. When this pulsation reaches its lowest point, you're going to perform this tech called an L jump and push forward into the brain while doing it. An L jump, as you probably guessed, is pressing the L button and the jump button on the same frame. Kind of like a cruise boost, but with jumping instead of bowling. And as a side note, whatever you do, do not get rid of your cruise boost here, because there's nowhere inside the brain where you can get it again. You're gonna have to reload this level and start from the beginning if that happens. Okay, so once you L jump and clip into the brain, push forward into this tube area so you land on it. There is an illusion here that makes it seem like you can jump inside of the tube from here, but it's actually very similar to prawn skip where there's no texture on the outside of the tube, so you'll kind of just run on top of it. Anyway, once you're on top of this tube, we're going to work on clipping into the correct side of this tube, for which you'll have to jump off like this, hold your double jump until you drop lower, then use it and turn yourself slightly to the right and push into the tube. Then you should grab the bottom area of it and clip in. And by the way, if you happen to fall here, take a look at this backup movement that's used to get back on top of the tube. So after you've clipped in, you can double jump and use a bubble spin to hit the first fuse. Then run this way, and be careful not to jump here because if you jump too early, you'll get stuck inside an invisible box that's floating here. So just keep running along the ground until you get to this line texture on the wall here. Then do a full jump onto it and you should land, where you can then run to the right and fall off the side. Use a bash during your 15 frames of runoff time, and pull to the right after you use it. Then space a double jump to land on this surface here. Once you land on that surface, bash up to the right to land on the tube again. And now the angle for this part is a little bit more tricky. If you run off a bit to the left here and then jump and pull to the right, SpongeBob should grab this ledge that'll clip you into the next tube. From there you can run to the next fuse and bash into it. And if you pull to the right toward the end of the bash, you should land on this object extruding from the wall, where you can push to the right and jump on this red clip. Then continue pulling right and jump from the red clip into the ceiling of this tube, where if you push forward into the right direction, SpongeBob will clip into the next tube. Now all you have to do here to finish this segment in the game itself is run forward and use a bowling shot to hit the final fuse. The timer stops when the final fuse is destroyed, regardless of which attack you hit it with. And there you have it. You have successfully learned the optional neurosurgery or fast brain strategy. And with that, let me be the first to congratulate you on learning how to speedrun Battle for Bikini Bottom. I know I said this video would be done in 3 parts, but I've actually decided to include a 4th part, which explains important concepts like where to split, where to find more resources for further improvement, how to interact with the rest of the community, how to submit times to the leaderboards, and how to avoid burnout. Remember that just because this route is capable of sub 1, it's not going to happen for you right away. In fact, it'll likely take months for you to even get close to it. So just keep in mind that speedrunning is a process, and part 4 will aim to help you learn that process. If you're already an experienced speedrunner, that's great, but stick around for the splitting conventions, resource access, and community stuff.
All my plans ruined. That does it. I'm becoming a lawyer.
Welcome back everybody. In this section of part 4, I'll teach you how to use splits. And as you can see, I prepared some splits and a layout for you to use. These will both be downloadable in the description of this tutorial video. The first thing you should notice are the numbers on the sides of the levels. For example, the 5 and 1 next to Bikini Bottom. The 5 represents the number of spatulas you should have at the end of the segment, and the 1 represents the number of socks you should have. Now, it's important to understand that some of these numbers are not the same ones you saw while learning the run. These numbers actually correspond to where most runners split during their runs, not how the segments of this video were structured. So, for example, Dream 2 split does not include the SBA spatulas that you buy from Mr. Krabs, because when most runners leave Dream 2, they split when scrolling down from Dream to Bikini Bottom. And then those spatulas that you buy from Mr. Krabs are included in the Mermalair segment, as you can see here, with the huge jump from 20 to 34. If this all seems confusing, don't worry, because I'll show you where to split on all of these after I'm done explaining LiveSplit. Before using LiveSplit to time your runs, right-click and go to Settings, and you'll be presented with these options. The important ones that you should set hotkeys for now are Start and Split, which is the key you'll use to start the timer and go to the next split. Reset, which is the key you use to reset the run. Undo Split, which is used to undo a split if you accidentally split. And Skip Split, in case you miss a split and you don't want to make your current split inaccurate. Once you have these hotkeyed, hit OK. So to explain what these other numbers mean, I'm just going to start the timer over here. And here we see that the number on the upper right side of the screen has changed. This number on the right side is your number of total attempts. So every time you started the timer, this goes up. And the number on your left side is your number of completed runs. So every time you finish a run, that goes up. This down here is your total time. So that's the time it took from you to start the run to where you are now. And the number down here is your segment time, which is how long it's taken you to get from the beginning of this segment to where you are now in the segment. The segment, again, being in this instance, Bikini Bottom. So now I'm going to go ahead and split, and remember, when I do this later to explain the segments, the split times are obviously not going to reflect how quickly you can beat the game, because it's going to be a matter of seconds. So understand this is only a demonstration. Alright, so I'm going to hit the split key now, and you will see that I have times for the total time I've been in the run, which is on the right side, and your segment time, which is on the left here. This column here is just going to show your deltas, which is your typical red is behind, green is ahead, and so forth. You probably already know how to read those, but pretty much if you see a green number there, it means you're ahead. If you see a red number, it means you're behind. And if you see a gold number, that means it was the best you've done for that split. So it's like a personal best for that one segment. The gold color only indicates that it was a best segment though, not whether it was ahead or behind. You can tell whether your gold split was ahead or behind your full run by looking at the sign prefixing the number. If it's a plus sign, it means you're behind. If it's a negative sign, it means you're ahead. And now at this point, I'll split again. And you'll see here that the total time, 3:36, is on the right, and the time from my segment for Dream was a 1:21. Obviously, I keep jump cutting to keep this concise, but yeah. So now I'm actually going to reset these splits and keep these times just so you can see here. When I start the timer again, you'll see that I have a best segment. And this is the best you've done in this segment because I saved my splits that I just did. And if I happen to beat this right here, you'll see that I golded the split and I got a 12-second split. So now if I reset this again and start the timer one more time, notice also the attempt counter is going up. The 12 that I just got as my best segment is now what shows there. So now I'm going to finish a run with these splits, and you'll see I'm going to have a lot of zeros, obviously, because we're not actually doing a run right now. So I just got a 27-second time. Hooray. Now, you're going to see here that all my times are filled out. And if I start the run again, and I split, see how I golded the split? That means that it's my best segment. I beat the previous best segment. And now, because my best split and my PB split is 0.3, I'm now losing time on that split because I haven't split yet. But I'm still ahead because my previous split was so good. Now, if I split here, you're going to see that I'm ahead by 0.9 seconds. And now, because this split wasn't 0.3, and I lost my 0.9 seconds from the last split, I'll split here and I'll be 8.8 seconds behind. Hopefully that makes sense. But what you should notice here is your sum of best segments and your best possible time. So this number down here is your sum of best segments, which is your sum of your best segments of your run. So all the best splits that I've gotten throughout this run added together, that's your sum of best, because the statistic that we're looking for here is how good of a run can you get if you theoretically played perfectly, which obviously once your sum of best is optimized enough, it's impossible, or rather improbable, to get that good of a run. But it's just a statistic to help you understand your potential. And best possible time, as you can see here, is counting up right now because I haven't finished a split yet. But that is just your sum of best plus the amount of time you've already lost in the run. So you can see how much time I've lost to my golds so far. And I'm, 2 minutes and counting here. This is already over 2 minutes ahead of my best possible time. Let's reset this to show you. So I'll start the split again, start the run, and you'll see that now when I get over 2.7 seconds, the best possible time starts counting up. That's because my best possible time now, because I'm losing time, is higher than my sum of best segments. Does that make sense? So it's adding the time that I'm currently losing. When I split, now it's going to start counting again because my best segment is 0.3, and because I didn't finish at 0.3, it's now counting up. Hopefully that makes sense. And here you have possible time save is 0 because I don't have any time save in this segment since the best time that I've ever gotten is the time that's also in my PB. So again, I will show you this. Here my possible time save is 16.6 because the best I've gotten is 2.7, and in my PB, this PB, whatever we call it here, is 19.3 for this segment. So I had 16.6 to save here, and now since it's counting down, it's now counting up because I'm starting to lose time. So the live segment is plus 10, or counting now, out of the 16 that I could have saved. And I forgot to mention earlier that since we finished a run, this is the 1 to count the run that you finished. Now, just a little word of advice. Until you start getting more experience at speedrunning, I'd highly recommend trying to keep this ratio up here, the 1 out of 6, maybe around like a 1 out of 10. So for every 10 attempts you do, try to finish 1 run. This will encourage you to play the game, finish more runs, and build more consistency. You don't want to start doing frequent resets until you're more experienced in the game because all it does is prevent you from improving. If you're spending too much time on the first 3 splits, you're not going to get better at the other ones. Anyway, once again, I will link the LiveSplit program, the layout, and the splits in the description of this video. And if you're already experienced in speedrunning, just download the split file anyway, because it's already made for you, you might as well. Now have a look at this demo on where to split your segments.
Welcome. With sleep too.
Hey, Plankton!
So that...
I feel like I should be working.
I see a prime bowling moment.
I'm sorry, Plankton. The
Keep up.
Now we'll discuss how to capture and record your gameplay if you're playing on a console, because if you're not playing on Dolphin Emulator, you're going to have to get a capture card. There are many options for this, but I personally recommend the GV USB 2 capture card for composite and S-video inputs. I'll leave a link for that one in the description as well. As for HDMI options, if you're using the PS3 or Xbox 360 versions, AverMedia and Elgato are usually pretty popular. I would personally recommend AverMedia over Elgato though, simply because I prefer the software. If you can't afford a capture card or can't figure out which one you want to buy, for now you can just use a webcam to record your gameplay by pointing it at the screen. Webcam submissions are fine as a beginner of this game, as are runs without video proof as well, at least until your time is sub 105. Just remember though that despite omitting video being fine when you're new, doesn't mean you shouldn't try to record your gameplay. If you have means of doing it, it's definitely good to get into the habit of it. The most popular streaming and recording software in the Battle for Bikini Bottom community is OBS Studio, so that is what I'll be recommending, and I'll link it in the description as well. There are plenty of tutorials on how to use these programs and devices out there, so I'll leave that to you guys to figure that out, so that way we can move on to the next step. Now that you've learned the full route, learned how to split, and record your gameplay, it's time to learn how to submit runs to the Any% leaderboard. Alright, we've arrived at the leaderboards, which are hosted at speedrun.com/BfBB. First things first, the categories are in descending order for duration and prestige. So as you can see, 100% is the longest category, Any% is in the middle, and NG Plus is the shortest category. Now if we go back to the Any% boards, which is what we're concerned with here, you get the list of all the best Any% times. As you can see, you can compare to other players. You can see what console they're on, when they submitted, and so forth. You can also view the rules right here for the category and the game itself. These are just the general rules that apply to every category. These are the ones that apply to just this. So as you can see, the video and audio proof threshold is 105, which means that you are allowed to submit runs with low quality video proof or low quality audio until you have a time that's under an hour and 5 minutes. So this might include like webcam submissions or possibly microphone recording of your audio. But once you reach the sub 55-minute threshold, submissions then require acceptable quality for video, which must be recorded with a capture card, along with acceptable captured audio input as well. And if this wasn't already clear, you don't need to have video proof until you have a time that's under an hour and 5 minutes. But you should still try to record your gameplay anyway if you can. If you have no means of recording or streaming, or your upload time is too slow, then don't worry about video proof until you can take care of those things. We have these thresholds in place to make the game more accessible for new players who still haven't bought a capture card. So during the period where you might still be deciding whether you enjoy speedrunning or if your capture card is just coming in the mail, you still have some leeway to submit runs. Now to submit your run, go up here and click Submit Run, and you'll be presented with this form. So the category, as we see, is Any%, that is correct. Since you're submitting a run for yourself, you can just skip the player form and go straight to UR and click Player 1, which will automatically fill that field. Then go down and submit your time. So in this case, the time that I'm submitting is my most recent Any% PB. It's already on the boards. So I'm just going to type 48:58. Just as an example, I'm going to delete later. Obviously, we're not going to have two of the same run on the same board, so let's go down to the version. If you're from the US and Canada, you're probably on the NTSC version, whereas most European countries or Australia would be on the PAL version. Obviously, there are a lot of exceptions, and a lot of PAL players end up switching to NTSC. So just look at your game disc, and it'll probably tell you on there whether it's NTSC or PAL. And if you're playing on Dolphin, it'll probably tell you on your library of games. So in my case, I'm on the NTSC version, so I'm going to click that. Now here for the platform, just select the console that you use to play on. If you're on Dolphin, select GameCube and click off the emulator box, but for me, I'm personally on the original Xbox version, so I'm just going to unclick that. Obviously, if you're on a console, this shouldn't even be clicked anyway, so just ignore it if you're playing on a console. So yeah, select the region, then go select your platform. For me, it's original Xbox. Okay, done. Now, most people submit their runs on the day they do them, but in case you did it the day before, or a few days before, or a week before or so, you can click on this field to select the date over here. For my run, I finished it on the 24th, so I'm just going to go over here and click on the 24th, which will bring me to 2020, February the 24th. For a video link, just copy the YouTube or Twitch link or whatever you have it on to your clipboard and paste it over here in video link. So that's my Twitch VOD. And if you're not submitting with video proof, you can just leave this field blank. If you uploaded your splits, you can link them here on splits.io, but if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. And for the description field, you can just type a comment about your run if you'd like. I'm just going to go ahead and type, yeah. And then we'll hit submit. Oh, and by the way, this field will not be here for you because you likely aren't a mod for the leaderboard. So I'm just going to uncheck this so you can see what it looks like when you submit for a normal user. So let's hit submit. And you get this message, your run will first need to be verified by a moderator. Alright, so let's go to view all, and you can see your pending runs here. And as we can see, the run that I've just submitted here is in my dock waiting. So I'll click on that, and as you can see, any percent in 4858 on 2/24/2020. And down here, the information checks out. And then you'll just have to wait for a moderator to verify it. We're usually pretty quick, so it shouldn't take long. While we're here on the BfBB leaderboards, I want to discuss two more things to transition to our next discussion. So if you take a look over here on the sidebar, you'll have the Discord and the website/wiki. If you don't have one already, I highly recommend making a Discord account and joining this server if you haven't already. The Discord server at the moment is the home of the community. So if you want any personal help with learning the run, or if you just want to meet and interact with other people who run the game, this is the place to do it. Regardless of whether you want to join the Discord or not, I highly recommend you go over to the website as well, which at the time of the making of this video is located at bfbb.site. If this changes in the future, it'll be updated in the description of this video. So if we go to the website, and by the way, I must say, at the time I recorded this video, the website was not finished yet. So if it looks a lot different by the time you guys see this video, that's the reason why. Up here we have the Discord server link, we have the Twitter page where you can see updates regarding the community. This link leads to the Battle for Bikini Bottom directory on Twitch, so you can maybe catch some streams from people who are playing the game. This section provides tutorials on how to mod the game. Over here we have discussions on how to install and play Randomizer, which scrambles warp destinations and collectibles like spatulas, socks, and shiny objects to keep the game replayable and fresh. It's really fun, I recommend checking it out. And there's also Speedrun Bingo, which is also really fun, but I'll explain that some other time. Alright, so let's go to the speedrunning tab over here. As you can see, there's a link to the leaderboards, but there's also a tutorial section, so if you click on this, and we go to the any percent section. And again, this section of the site is still unfinished, but what you'll see here are guides on how to learn more difficult routes past the one that you've learned just now. And they all have the same convention with the number of spatulas and number of socks. So you can see here we're under the intermediate route section, and it'll show you the different tricks here. These will all have links going to their respective pages, but if it's not totally finished by the time this releases, you can just go to speedrunning and to strats to search these on your own. But if we keep going down, you'll see there's also an advanced route tutorial and the top level route tutorial. So these are all just written guides on how to do the more advanced routes. And by the way, if any of this is confusing to you, be sure to join the Discord server and ask as many questions as you'd like. This community is very friendly and welcoming, and we are glad to help out. So let's actually go to the strats tab, and you'll see here that all of these skips are outlined in their own pages. So let's, for example, go to Area 1 skip. The one that we outlined in this tutorial was Bring It Around Town, if you remember. That was when we used the save game glitch to walk around the downtown scenery and go to the second hub area. But there's also the ledge grab method, which is the harder method, but it also saves quite a bit of time. So this is an example of a strat that you might want to add if you're struggling to get sub 1 with the resources and tutorials that were provided in this video. Because of course, everybody improves at different rates, everyone has different styles of playing, so as you develop as a player, you're going to want to add different time saves and different strats. This resource is the best place to find those. And by the way, if you scroll down here, you have the video resources, which includes the ledge grab method. So if we watch this, Jack will give us a tutorial on how to do the ledge grab method of Area 1 skip. This strat is pretty difficult, but it does save a lot of time, so definitely look into that in the future. As you should for the rest of these strats that are listed in this encyclopedia that we made for you. The road to sub 1 hour will have a lot of twists and turns, so make sure you're using these supplemental resources to improve. The already established runners would have loved to have a resource like this while learning, so definitely take advantage of it. You've learned the route, you've learned how to split, you've learned how to record gameplay, submit runs, and learn new strats to improve. The only thing left is to join the community and start up your first runs. Like I mentioned before, you should join the BfBB Discord server through the community website or the leaderboard, and when you finish your first run, post a screenshot of your finished splits in the Any% channel. It's a great icebreaker, and I guarantee you'll be met with a lot of support. Also, keep watch of the Battle for Bikini Bottom directory on Twitch, and look for some live streams from our community members. I'll link this directory in the description of the video. There are plenty of great players and personalities to learn from in this community, all responsible for some of the most memorable storylines and moments in my time speedrunning. This community has been my home for the past 4 years, and it wouldn't be the same without the great people I've met through this speedrun. So many of these memories, storylines, and triumphs have been genuinely inspiring.
Look, listen to me, listen to me. If I'm able to get a 1:13:44 on a fucking beginner route, so could you. So could you. You can fucking do it. You can do it.
If you enjoyed this journey, I'd appreciate if you'd leave a like on this video and provide feedback in the comments section. Subscribe to this channel for more Battle for Bikini Bottom content, and content for the Rehydrated remake in the near future. Thank you for watching, and good luck on the runs.